Mr. Stephen Esquaga,
Here.
Mr. Andy Chapman,
He's here. He's just stepped out for a second.
Ms. Shannon Keel. She might be joining us later. Mr. Rick Murdoch,
Here.
Ms. Ann Silver, and Ms. Jessica Sferaza.
Here.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a quorum this morning. Just a couple housekeeping items. For those of you participating here on the board, please remember to turn your mics on before speaking and speak as directly into the mic as possible so those on Zoom can hear you clearly and understand the commentary. I would ask that everybody silence their cell phones today. Like I said, this is a robust meeting agenda, and we have a lot to get through. So I want to make sure that our discussions are succinct and cohesive, and we stay on topic as much as possible. So I may be pulling people over if it's kind of gets too outside of the realm of what we need to be stayed and focused on. And so with that, I will move into item B. This is public comment. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment? And Madam Clerk, will you let the record show that Ms. Silver is here? And now in attendance, so we have, perfect. And do we have any public comment, Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have two. The first being Brian Moss.
Welcome, Mr. Moss. If you're going to speak right there from the podium, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Brian Moss. I am the Vice President of Business Development with Greater Nevada Field and the Reno Aces. Good morning, everybody. I've got some notes here, so bear with me. I wanted to thank the board for the creation of a new funding mechanism to seed different traditions in the community that we're looking to establish. We have an opportunity currently developing to bring a Premier League team to the Reno area for a friendly on July 16th. If awarded, we would be the smallest market ever in America to host a senior team from the Premier League. We have hosted Liga MX teams in the past, but the costs for a Premier League team are substantially higher, and it's just such a great opportunity for our community. We have submitted the information required through the application process on the website, and we really appreciate your consideration in securing the event with the goal of creating this annual tradition. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The second one is from Eric Henry Anderson.
Welcome, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm a musician and artist in the area, and today I was just going to tell you a little bit about the Battle Axe and Tracks Music Festival, which I assume many of you guys are aware of already. It's going to happen October 1st here in the area, and it's being presented by Gina Lopez and Ken Farley, who have done extensive work with the Brewery Arts Center in Carson City. You've certainly heard of the Brewery Arts Center, but they do amazing work presenting all sorts of artistic projects, most notably the Levitt Amp concert series, which I've had the privilege of being a part of, not only as a solo artist, but also with the novelists over the past few years. And it's really been amazing what they've done with that project. They grew it from a few hundred in attendance to 2,000-3,000 people over the last year or so, even with the obviously tremendous challenges we've all faced with COVID. They've really made an amazing series for Carson City, but also for just the greater area. And so we're really in good hands with this project that they're working on right now. A lot of really cool national acts coming in, as well as some great local acts. And really what I can say is just the way they produce events. Artists are always put first. Artists are well compensated. Just the way that they handle hospitality. It's really just an artist-first approach. Details are always handled in a really first-class way. Kpis Sound has been part of the Levitt Amp series, and what I can say is, being somebody who's had an opportunity to travel and tour quite a bit to other music festivals around the country, a lot of times sound and lighting are just sort of an afterthought, and that is not the way that Ken and Gina and Kelly and their associated team with Brewery Arts Center handle things. It's always a top-notch project. So really, it's just been amazing. Another thing I just wanted to mention quickly is during COVID, they found a way to really adapt to social distanced stuff, where they had a flatbed concert series, and they would take artists all around Carson City neighborhoods and we would play, socially distanced on a flatbed truck. So just really creative ways to accommodate the pandemic and really keep arts and music vibrant. So really hoping you guys can help out with that festival. It's going to be really amazing, and I'm sure we'll bring a lot of excitement to the area, as well as hopefully some community and economic benefit as well. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, seeing no further public comment, is there anybody else wishing to speak this morning? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, go ahead.
just really quickly, I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I am on Zoom because we have an airport meeting at the exact same time as this one. So going to try and hit both of them, this one, and try and hit the end of the airport meeting. So I just wanted to put that on the record and apologize for not being in there in person.
No worries, Ms. Fraza. We appreciate you participating the best of your opportunity, your abilities. All right. We're on to item C. This is the approval of the agenda for the May 19th regular meeting of the Board of Directors. There are no amendments that I need to make this morning. It is as posted. Is there any changes or any suggestions that need to be pulled at this time? Mr. Harris, do you have anything that needs to be pulled?
No, sir.
All right. Seeing nothing else, I'm looking for a motion. I have a motion from Ms. Silver. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Second from Councilwoman Bybee. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, we are on to item D. This is the approval of the minutes of the May 6th special meeting of the Board of Directors. And this is for possible action. Is there any adaptations that need to be made to the minutes that have been presented to you in your binder? Seeing no changes to the minutes, looking for a motion to approve the minutes. I have a motion from Ms. Silver. I have a second from Mr. Murdoch. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries unanimously. All right, let's move into item E1. This is the Reno Sparks Convention Visitors Authority CEO update. Mr. Harris, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I make my way up, we're going to go through a CEO update presentation. If the folks in the back can help toggle that over. All right, hopefully everyone can see this online. I'm going to walk through a presentation here, just update what's happening in the destination, as long as this works. Oh, Kristen, turn this on. Okay. How about that? There we go. All right, so we're going to start off real quick by a sales video. This is an updated video that we have. It's real short. It's 30 seconds and talking about everything that we're doing when it comes to the meetings and conventions. It really gets to highlight what's happening with our sales efforts. Here we go.
Welcome to Reno, Tahoe, where America's largest alpine lake meets the biggest little city in the world, and where you can plan with confidence, knowing we have an amazing combination of incentives and destination benefits. Get in touch with us to see how we can bring peace of mind to your planning and provide you with the most up-to-date info. And of course, you'll always find more to explore at visitrenotahoe.com.
So again, this is the shorter version of a piece that we do. We have like a 2-minute piece. This is a 30-second piece. And when you see this stuff, this is like one of the many reasons why I love my job and what we do here. There's amazing things that we have going on. The video, I've heard from Mike's team that they eat this up, and it's helping us use this content to help generate RFPs and ultimately more business. So again, part of the update for the board is all these things when it comes to the content and things that we're creating to help prove and push our mission forward. I want to get into a quick update of the annual goals, things that we've been working on and where we're at. So first off, I want to talk about sales, and sales when it comes specifically to group room nights. On the left, you're going to have our annual sales goal, and that is 206,500 group room nights. As of mid-April, we are at 192,676. Now that translates into 93% to goal. When we forecast and we look at where we're headed and where we're going to wind up, I'm told that we're going to wind up between 208,000 and 212,000, so we will exceed our year goal. The conservative estimate in the forecast, so I think Mike told me was 208. Is that right? and the higher end, we're going to look at probably about 212. So we're right in line where we need to be in the year. Let's look at some of the goals when it comes to marketing. On the left-hand side, you can see all the earned media, website users. What I'm going to do is I'm going to blow this up so you guys can see where we are to plan, and some of them have far exceeded our plan. The one piece on the bottom, the paid media impressions, is 63% to plan, and that is because we turned that on around mid-April, right when we were starting to make sure that we get to the plan, and that goal is 410 million impressions. And so we're right on track with everything that we need to do on the marketing side, as well as our sales side for year-end goals. So Collateral, a lot of things that we're doing right now is, obviously there's a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to the ASM transition. And so a lot of what we're doing is updating the collateral. Our marketing team is putting together. What you can see here are samples. These are proofs of the collateral that we're finishing up. And for that collateral, we have updated photos. We've updated content. This is now in final production. And so when you have the Reno Event Center, you've got the National Bowling Stadium. Again, this is updated with the transition and where we're moving to. The third thing, obviously the Live Events Center, that piece is being finalized as well. And then in addition to that, obviously the convention center itself. So all this is being updated as we work towards a transition in that June 2nd date. And once that's finished, the board will receive printouts of that. I've asked that that be put in all of our packets every time that we have meetings moving forward, so you will see those types of pieces in the months ahead. This is also part of our plan at the beginning of the year to collaborate and bring in other DMOs so that we can work closer together. That was one of the initiatives that we had at the beginning. This is Tahoe South along with our staff that was here recently. In addition to the 20-plus folks that were in here, we had about another 13 that were online. And again, how do we work together and move our mission forward in Northern Nevada? And so Andy's going to come up here with his team here soon enough, and we're going to continue that as we look to facilitate our collaboration with the other regional DMOs. When it comes to awards, this is a recent award that Art had the opportunity to accept, and it was part of Expedia's Explore program. What's really interesting about this, we were a winner in one of 8 categories globally for a specific campaign, an airline campaign of the year that was then celebrated. There was more than 3,000 people at a conference that came in this month, or earlier this month, and so Reno Tahoe is being recognized globally for the work that we're doing. So that's phenomenal, and kudos to the team for helping to make that happen. When we talk about awards in general, 25 different awards our team has captured this year. This was the Hermes Awards, 5 different awards from platinum, gold, and honorable mention. You can see the different categories that we have. The work that the team is doing is phenomenal, and it's being recognized by the industry. So kudos to all the folks to help make that happen. Another piece, again, this is another quick 30-second piece. This is really on the leisure side, and it really touches on all aspects of the destination as we look to promote. Here's a quick look at it. And here's a quick look at it. So again, short form content, 30-second spots. We have long form as well. And if you really look closely, we had all 3 areas represented, from Sparks to Lake and certainly Reno. And we're using that in our digital delivery and our content creation. This is an update in terms of the transition when it comes to Airmark. Just this morning, Ben and I were talking online. We are in the final stages of the contract. I would say we're 99% done with that contract, and hopefully, I would hope, fingers crossed, that Airmark's been a great partner so far, and moving forward, hopefully today or tomorrow, we can look to have that signed off and finished. This is actually a meeting that took place a couple weeks ago, and it was the Airmark folks coming into town with our marketing, our finance folks to help move forward and to plan that working relationship. So we talked about the contract being done. Airmark is also looking to assume the liquor license with ASM, and I think Ben and I are looking for one sheet that's going to carry that, which is the indemnification. So they're working through that as well. So everything is all systems go, and we're getting real close to that transition and moving over. I want to touch on a couple things. Mayor, you had asked last time about bring your convention home, so here's a quick update in and around that. The piece you see on the bottom, that was the old piece that we did way back when. I don't know, Mike, 2011, 13, I forget the year, but that's being updated currently right now. But even though that collateral is being updated, we're moving forward, and we are working actively with local folks to bring the conventions here. So in the top left-hand corner, the National Association Commission on Women, thanks to our board member, Ann Silver. They're coming here this July, so we're tapping into locals that are helping bring that. PBS Reno and the National Judicial College, we've talked to both of those on a local level as well, and we are working to see avenues to help bring business from local people here. So we will continue to do that once that collateral is finished, but we're doing that right now. And then the University of Nevada, Reno, we're working and we have programs with the university to help reward folks at the university for helping bring business here. So that's an ongoing partnership that we work with, that's active. And to the mayor's point and how important it is that we tap into that avenue, we're certainly going through that as well. So let me talk about a quick facilities transition update. I mentioned this before, but we're in the final stages of this. Again, we're headed towards that handover on June 2nd. This is that chart that we've been working through all along, and I'm going to do some quick updates in and around that. This is our roadmap. Really, we're now next at the onboarding for the new employees. That's going to happen here. And then the last week, the branding and the changeover from ASM back to the RSCVA is happening right now. So let me just talk some quick numbers in and around that transition. 94% of all jobs have been published. 72 have been accepted or in process of being accepted, and those numbers are actually as of this morning. So if you don't see that in your packet, we're trying to get the latest and greatest information to make sure you have that. We've got 7 additional offers out to candidates, and I believe we're going to get to 90% or a little over 90% of our goal of all the hires. The other few positions, honestly, is the labor market. And we've talked a lot about that. It's ongoing for us to get there, but we certainly will. So we're super close in having that happen. And then this was also asked by the mayor, and I wanted to make sure we talked about it, the incentives for the ASM employees that was brought up in a previous meeting. We've paid retention bonuses through the augmentation. That is set up to be done, and every single ASM employee who received an employment offer also received a retention bonus to be paid on their first paycheck. So that's part of what we've been doing as part of that retention program. And in addition, bonuses will be given if they're stayed 6 months. So there's that commitment to come through the transition and stay with us 6 months to make sure that we tackle that as well. So a little bit on team building. This is a shot of more than, I think, about 24, 25 of our team members that we had an outing at Kingpin Bowl recently. And I apologize to all the team that I wasn't there. I had a medical procedure that day and couldn't join, but certainly great opportunity to mix it up and do some good work with our teams and a lot of smiles. So we're working through that and pushing forward our team to do some things as well. I want to talk about something that we haven't during a regular meeting in a while, and this is something that happened recently on a national level. Destination Capitol Hill, which is an annual event that people from DMOs and leaders all over the country descend upon Capitol Hill, and they're calling on elected officials in D.C. And so that's really important when it comes to moving forward our agenda, when it comes to travel and tourism, the omnibus bill and other things that we were talking to our elected officials with. Certainly meeting with Cortez Masto, we had a gentleman from Caesar's Palace, Carlos, who's in their government relations, that was part of that visit with me. Visiting with Senator Rosen, was with Mr. Amadei and others as well as part of that outreach to our officials in D.C. in a national effort. When we talk about travel trends, this is a quick screenshot. On the left-hand side, you can see where Nevada ranks. On the right-hand side, we're looking at where U.S. travel ranks in terms of spending for U.S. travel month by month. Now, Nevada as a whole is doing 1% better than it is nationally, but they track that by state, what's happening when it comes to travel spending. And so we're almost back to where we were pre-COVID in 2019, and we're doing just a tiny bit better on that spend than the national folks are. When it comes to jobs continues to be the issue, and I think we all know that in this destination. Certainly Paul can talk about that when he gets up in a moment. But here's some data that was released by the National Bureau of Labor Statistics. The economy added 478,000 jobs in April. That means that we're near a full recovery as a society here in the U.S. Leisure and hospitality, however, added just 78,000 jobs in April, the lowest monthly total since the end of 2020. So that recovery, specifically in our areas, whether it's the hotels, restaurants, DMOs, it's still challenging when it comes to that. At 8.5% unemployment, leisure and hospitality still has a higher share of jobs lost than any other industry in the country except for mining. So it's still very, very impactful to our industry. And with 1.4 million jobs lost, leisure and hospitality far exceeds any other industry when it comes to that impact. So we still have some work to do. And it's not just Reno, it is in our industry as a whole. Lastly, in terms of my update, Conference of Mayors here, June 3 through 6. Really excited about this. I think I heard this morning there's 749 folks that are registered for the conference. That starts on the 3rd. There's events and really some great things and great opportunity for exposure for us. I don't know how that breaks down between mayors and workers and industry folks, but just about 750 folks that are set up, and we have events with that. With that, I'll stop and ask for any questions, Mr. Chair, from the board.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Harris?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Go
Can
ahead.
you hear me?
Yeah, Mayor Sheeby, go ahead.
Sorry, I can't, it's hard to kind of tell who wants to speak in the room. Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. Really appreciate the update. What I just want to get some clarity on for the retention bonuses, is that happening now? Or has it?
Yeah,
I guess I'm trying to figure out.
Madam Mayor, that's
Have you
been
done that?
happening
You're
all
going-
along. That's been happening all along as part of the retention program. It's come through HR in terms of when we talk to people, through the offers itself, and that has been communicated both in person by Dee Dee on our HR side as well as through emails as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will close that.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, members of FRAZA.
Can I just ask a quick question? I know we have a full agenda. And I just a compliment too. Just want to thank staff on the transition. I mean, what a huge task to go in-house. I just want to compliment staff on making that happen. Big priority for the board. Charles, do you foresee any challenges with the transition? I know you said we have 70 folks coming over. Are you seeing any hiccups? We got the food vendor. Anything we should be aware of? Or are we good to go?
Thank you for that question. So just big picture, we are at 94% in market, 71% have accepted or in process today. Those 7 offers will get us, I believe, Jessica, to either 82 or 83%. Of that, the biggest hiccup we have is just that labor. And I want to say that there's like 5 or 6 positions that either through lack of people applying or that we had to relist it, just the labor market is the only challenge we have to make sure that those positions are filled. And so we're working extra hard. I know Dee Dee, Trent, Courtney are all working really hard, Jose as well, to try to make sure that we fulfill that staff obligation. But it's just finding the right people that can work and fulfill that. So that's our biggest challenge.
And then just following up on the retention bonus, and I think I heard this correctly, sorry, and I have my video off because the internet's a little wobbly. So we're giving it to them to sign up. Is there an incentive for them to stay as well, Charles? Is that what I heard you say? After the 6-month mark?
Yeah, so that is the incentive. The incentive is to reward it based upon a percentage of each employee, and if they're here for 6 months, then that is just basically let go, right? So they will see that in the first paycheck that comes through, and that's part of the incentive to keep them on, is to reward them and to have that in. That's part of that program, and that's been communicated, and we're doing our best. As a matter of fact, I failed to mention this. One of the things that I really wanted to do was to do a welcome breakfast or lunch with the entire staff from the RSCVA to the folks that are coming over. And We wanted to do it right when the transition, but we've got this small event called the Conference of Mayors, and so everyone's running around. I don't think we're going to be able to get there till later in the month, but certainly we want to make sure that we onboard them. And I would actually offer to all of our board members that want to come out for that as well, would love to have you as part of that event, and I'll have Dee Dee send a note out, or Lisa will, to make sure that we welcome folks and move forward in the right way.
Thank you so much.
All right. Seeing no further questions on the CEO update, we will move on, close out our information, and move on to F1. And this is presentations and review and possible approval of the RSCVA 3-year strategic plan for fiscal year 2023 through 2025. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Harris to introduce Mr. Paul Amet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again, everybody. Charles Harris. We're bringing back Paul Amet, who has been here a couple times, and he's with MMGY, Destination Next. And this is an update to the March meeting that we had, where we did really kind of like a temperature check on where we were headed, and got great feedback from the board. What you have in your packets is the written outline of that. Paul's going to give you a visual presentation about that. You'll recognize some of those things, but really this is our guiding light for the next 3 years. And what I would say to that as well is that we will come back to the board for the yearly plan in July. So this is big picture, and then we'll get into the weeds every July to make sure that we're laddering up against that plan. So with that, I'm kind of stalling as Chris moves over to that presentation. But really, having one of the folks that's the best in the business that works with hundreds of DMOs around the country, I'd like to welcome back Mr. Paul Amet. Paul?
Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be back. It's on now. Good morning. Just while we're just putting this up on the screen, this is the recommended final plan presented back to your board for ratification today. So I think hopefully that will. Can you just open this up here, put this in presentation mode on this one? If that should work. So just, I think just as I can just to set up the presentation, there was a tremendous amount of engagement in this plan to pull the plan together since last fall. We did 26 one-on-one interviews. We did a comprehensive, thank you very much. Yep. We did a comprehensive survey of industry, community leaders, clients. We had over 400 participants in that survey. We had a number of different, I think it was at least 5 or 6 sessions with the management team, and then a couple of really good sessions with the board. We also had discussions with the consulting team, the local team that were previously working on previous plans. So what I want to do, I know you've got the full plan is in your packets. I just want to touch on some of the highlights here, starting with the vision and the mission. This was the recommended new vision for the organization. We really do believe that the unique value proposition for Reno Tahoe, this destination, this organization is to really become that preferred outdoor gaming and event destination. I think it's really the combination of those 3 core elements that really do differentiate you as a destination. And these were, we had feedback on these at the last session in March. The mission is the recommended mission to support the sustainable growth of our communities through the power of travel. What we're finding now today is for many organizations charged with marketing and promoting, developing their destinations, it's more than just economic growth. Sustainability is really a fundamental element of that. So this was changed as well to reflect the important roles that you can play in that area. Now, when we look at the goals, there was a lot of work done last fall with the management team. You had accomplished a lot of what was in your previous plan. So what we really wanted to do is to look at a number of specific initiatives that should be considered as part of this plan. So we went through a very sort of rigorous process to look at that. And where we ended up when we clustered the most important initiatives was really we landed on three core goals for the organization for the next 3 years. The first one is around sales and marketing, continuing to do all the work that you're doing some great work in terms of positioning Reno, Tahoe in the marketplace, all of the work on leisure, group business. The second goal around destination management, and this is product development, developing experiences. You've got a lot of different major work being done in terms of all of the facilities and venues that you have. And then finally, the third area is destination alignment. This is all of the outreach with industry, government, community organizations, leaders, to really move the organization and the destination forward. We had a major discussion on this at the board session, and I think that the feedback was really positive in terms of these three critical areas. Now, what we've done in these three goals is we worked with the management team to identify 15 specific initiatives. These are the big things that the team, and I support this 100%, the critical initiatives that need to be accomplished over the next 3 years to achieve this. So for each of these three goals, we've identified in this plan specific initiatives, and then the second page is some of the major tactics for each, and then the third one is what the KPIs are to track performance for each of these three areas. So one of the things, and I want to just emphasize, this was a recommendation I made to Charles, was this strategic plan, it's not a tactical plan. This is really to try to identify with the board sort of critical initiatives that need to be pursued over the next 3 years. And then it's really in the annual business plan that you want to have a lot more of the detail to sort of flesh out some of that. So I'm going to just go through these just at a high level. On the sales and marketing side, major initiatives around group sales, tourism, leisure tourism, looking at organization and destination brand, looking at new market segmentation, and then really looking at how you can use events, leverage events, current events, new events to really move the destination forward. And leads have been identified for each. There are specific tactics for each of these in terms of some of the specific areas to initiatives or actions to move these forward. And then what we've looked at, and this is really based on what I believe is best industry practice, is you're tracking a lot of critical information about your results. For a strategic plan and KPIs, we tend to see now a shorter list. You should still be tracking all of these other metrics that you've got, but a shorter list of really important ones. So this plan includes identified for sales and marketing, the four major ones are total number of visitors, room nights that you're generating, economic impact of tourism's contribution to the economy, and then occupancy rates. So that's what we've got, sales and marketing. These, right now, these would be fleshed out on an annual basis in your annual business plans for these KPIs. On the destination management side, here are 4 critical initiatives. Obviously, the facilities plan, putting together your long-term facilities plan with all of the venues that you've got. Air service development, really, really critical. Downtown development, and then the convention center district. So major initiatives around all of those. These really were some of the biggest discussion areas in all of the engagement that we did during the past 8 months. And again, tactics. On the KPI side here, and this is really leading edge stuff, this is really the direction we're seeing, is looking at visitor satisfaction scores, facility client satisfaction, you're already doing some of that, and then also resident sentiment scores. So these are new KPIs that are being used in many destinations to track alignment in their communities. And then finally, around destination alignment, here there's 6 critical initiatives. The first one dealing with resident and community awareness, community engagement. As Charles already mentioned, some of the work that's being done to really expand the DMO network, that can be really useful for advocacy, also just for create opportunities for efficiency in some cases, looking at and updating the organization structure, reviewing board governance, creating a research and business intelligence unit, really critical today. There's tremendous opportunities with new data sources that are available. And then finally, just a commitment to make sure on the financial side that you maintain that fiscal prudence and responsibility. So again, number of tactics. And here in terms of KPIs, the ones that were looked at here to do the DNEX survey again at the end of this sort of time frame to look at did your scores, did you move the needle in some of these, an expanded business intelligence unit, and then also to look at your funding levels to have an expanded special event fund as well as expanded reserved funds. So that's an overview of the plan. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Stan.
All right. Anne's hogging the microphone from, no, I'm kidding. No, I appreciate, I really, you know, I thought highly of the work that On Strategy did prior to this on getting the plan. I think this has been a great handoff. There's really nothing I disagree with. I like the breaking down in these 3 segments of sales and marketing, destination management, and then the alignment with the individual KPIs. And honestly, it's something that I kind of want to keep on my desk as we move forward and work off this. I will, and I was going to jump in on the front end. I thought I'll let you present through. I do just want to raise, I think I brought my hand up on the last time on, I do have a concern on the mission change, and not so much that it shouldn't evolve from what it was. I do just want to be on the record, though, that I think when we move away from, I just don't want the group to forget that it's about room night generation and room tax creation, and that, because that really, that blood flows through and it makes this plan achievable. And again, I don't have a problem with the whole support the sustainable growth of our communities through the power of travel. It's a little squishy to me, and I wish there was a way to kind of tie it, almost a blend, and I don't want to just totally butcher your mission statement, but when you take the prior one, I still wish there was a way to say, yeah, I don't know if it's drive overnight stay, I don't know if it's create room tax, however, to then support the sustainable growth, but I just don't want to lose track. There's a real tendency to have mission creep, and the next thing you know, we're spending all of our dollars on things that probably don't, maybe we want to support it, but it is not a priority. And I think that at the end of the day, we have to drive room tax, because that is going to be how we reinvest all these programs. So again, those are just my, but otherwise, I really think this is outstanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. And I wanted to jump in because I had the same concerns about the mission, and the mission is, I want to bring the history back. Obviously, this started as a Washoe County Fair and Recreation Board. And as a Washoe County Fair and Recreation Board, this has evolved to provide branding and marketing for our region through that understanding. And I am concerned about mission creep as well, in the sense that it provides for other local agencies to look at our budget as potential opportunities to subsidize other endeavors that they may consider tourism, but doesn't really meet our direct. And so that was one of the reasons why we drafted the mission the way we did in the last period. Not to say that we can't evolve the mission, to Stephen's point. I think there's value add in supporting sustainable growth, but I'm concerned that with that mission creep, that we move away from our goals and initiatives, because the only way you're going to be sustainable with these goals and initiatives, and one of those things are going to come up in the budget here in a minute, is how do we maintain a fiscal budget with this ability of kind of this open-ended, everybody can kind of grab at the pot. And that's concerning to me, and I'm glad Stephen brought it up, because if he didn't, I was going to. And we really spent a lot of time on that mission to prevent that from happening. And so I don't mind evolving the mission as we currently have it. I just want to make sure we don't lose the general understanding of why we are who we are. And so those are my comments. Charles, I'm going to give that back to you. I know you have.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I appreciate it. One of the things that we came away from that March board meeting was really full support of the mission and vision and the values, and creating those values, which is kind of why we put the single sheets in your books, right? Because we had that. One of the things that I want to provide feedback to both of you, and I really appreciate the feedback. I think we're looking at big picture, 20,000 foot. We will get into that goal when it comes to our annual goals for the room nights, Stephen, in that annual plan that we're going to come back in July and say, we've got to go from 206,000 maybe to 250,000, or whatever that number is going to be, and that has to be part of our priority to promote, market, and sell that destination, so it falls into. If this board wants us to augment or tweak or change that mission, then this is a great time to come back and revisit that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Murdoch.
I just want to second what you and Stephen said, and we're a tax-based agency that collects room tax from tourism. If you don't generate tourism, if you don't generate conventions, and you don't generate room tax, we cannot fund anything. Anything. Our buildings, our facilities, our tourism initiatives, whether we are giving airlines money and advertising with them. So I got to get back to basics, because I guess I've been doing this too long, but we need room nights. We need room nights. We need room nights. And I don't care if it's buying conventions, coming up with new events that tract. Really, we're a regional market when you think about us. And we've got 11 million people going to the west of us. I think we got to get back into that business and stay in that business, because we won't have any funding. And again, I like local stuff. I really do. I like doing everything we can in the nonprofits, and especially for schools and things for kids. I love all that. But we got to have money to move our mission forward to fill the tax coffers, not only in the city, but every incline. Andy, we need this money, or we cannot do it. So I would say I'd like to see the emphasis back to the mission statement: room nights.
Mr. Amell, if you want to answer that, but Member Keel has a question on Zoom, and then Councilmember Bybee, I'll go to you next. So, Ms. Keel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear.
Okay,
Thank
go
you.
ahead. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. Two questions. The first one, excuse my ignorance, but do we did we have these KPIs and goals for this fiscal year that we have an update on if we've achieved actuals on the KPIs, or did we, I don't remember, did we pass on that because of the changes and whatnot?
So Shannon, this is Charles Harris speaking. The goals that we have for this year, I kind of covered in my CEO update, both on the sales goals year to date, marketing goals years to date, and at the end of the current fiscal year, I will provide a report on year end.
Okay, so, and did they include the numbers, the actual like number of visitors and number of room nights?
On the current goals, there was no specific goal in this year's plan for an increase in specific visitors. On the group room nights and other areas as outlined by the board, we have all those as part of our KPIs.
The group, and that was the 93% that you talked about.
Correct. And part of the issue was we turned off the measurement during COVID on certain areas, which we've now reinstated and re-engaged coming out of that to be able to measure that. So moving forward, that's why we put that back in the plan, in the 3-year plan moving forward, and we will measure that each and every year.
Is that the visitors coming over the hill? Was there like a tracker of the cars? I can't remember how we did that.
So it's us defining and updating how we measure a visitor, and we've had some lengthy discussions with this with the board in the past. Currently, a visitor is defined anybody that comes outside of Washoe County, which could be 350 miles away going up to the border, or it could be just going, east or west.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then my second question is, and I've mentioned this before, so if the board disagrees or staff disagrees, I will let it go certainly. But and it kind of goes back to the room nights that everyone talked about. I really do feel like under the tactics that we should have an effort into figuring out where, when we identify what our key destinations are that or areas that we want to go after to attract, figuring out how those regions and cities, what they think about Reno. I still feel like Reno has a long way to go with, I think our brand is pretty good, but getting that brand out there and changing people's awareness and perception. For any of you, and I'm sure it's most of you in the room, have tried to attract talent for your workplace in this region, you probably know how difficult it is because people still don't understand Reno. And I really would like to have a full-fledged survey. I would like to have some market research done to figure out what people think of Reno and how we can change that perception. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keel. I appreciate that. Councilwoman Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The presentation as a whole, there's not really anything I disagree with. I really like that strategic roadmap that we can look at what breaking it down into those categories, also showing who is responsible for each one of them, and then looking at the KPIs that we can measure gives us a really specific roadmap to follow, which I think obviously that's what a strategic plan does. I think on the mission, I really get what the rest of you were saying, and really, like Mr. Murdoch said, we can't operate without the room night revenue. It's a priority for us. Could we add to that mission statement, because we support the sustainable growth of our communities through the power of travel, could we add and generation of room night revenue to that, so the room nights are there and it's supporting that growth of our communities? I don't know, just a suggestion. I don't know if that wording is good or if that answers what the rest of you are addressing, but I agree that the room nights, obviously we can't do. Or are we up, at 60,000 feet for the mission, and then we dial down into more specific, and the room nights are there? I think as long as they are there and a priority, Mr. Paul, is it necessary to have that in the mission statement if we have it addressed very strongly further down in our goals and objectives as we move forward?
Do you want me to make her respond? My recommendation is, if it does not clearly resonate with the entire board now, the way it's written, we should take another cut at making tweaks to it. So I think what we could do, if you're comfortable with the rest of the plan, what we could potentially do, this would be a recommendation, is you could ratify the plan with the exception of the mission, and then we could work on a few other options that you could be to be reviewed for the next meeting. But I wouldn't be comfortable with the amount of sort of discussion and debate about this. It would be better, I think, to write a more refined, that everyone is really prepared to rally behind. So that's, and it would be very dangerous if a mission statement gets you going down rabbit holes that you shouldn't be going, that's a significant issue that I would not want to be part of the reason that you're being put into that situation. So we'd be happy to do that if that would be useful.
Ms. Silver.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Risk, am I on? Okay. I agree with what my colleagues have said, primarily because we have a fiduciary responsibility and we're overseeing a lot of money. Yeah. And I think if it means adding a few sentences or words, room tax is what drives this entire mission and board, and the fiduciary responsibility to increase room nights, create the revenue, is what will ultimately benefit the community. I think also by streamlining the mission statement itself will remind each of us every meeting we have that this is all about conventions and people coming here and staying overnight. It's a lot of other things too, and we don't want to overlook special events and the kinds of appeals that come to us, but this is all about attracting people who will stay in our area, in our hotels, casinos, resorts, etc. Thank you.
Thank
Can
Ms.
I
Silver.
ask,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Andy.
Thank you. Great plan for staff and Paul, you and your team. Thank you very much for it. I just had two things, and one on this. I mean, you could easily, so I'd go back. Yes, room nights are core, but it's not the only thing we do. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I think it can easily slide in a sustainable growth and economic vitality of our community, something like that. But I think in general, it's okay, and I support where the board's going on that. My one question is on the destination management part of this, and in the top of that, there's a sentence that says the RSCVA collaborates with public and private partners to inform and support product, service, and experience development. What I want to make sure under the initiatives that this would not preclude, and let me step back, the destination management needs in the Truckee Meadows part of the RSCVA jurisdiction is different than in the Tahoe Washoe side. And none of the initiatives, in my opinion, address kind of the responsibility that I believe RSCVA has as we roll up that hill to the Incline Crystal Bay portion. And I've talked about it here before, and I will be talking about it hopefully in the future as well. So there are different destination management needs for us up there. And I just want to make sure that the initiatives that are pulled out here don't preclude what some of those concerns and the support that we may be looking for in the Incline Crystal Bay area. And I don't know if it's worth another initiative that talks about something around the development of Washoe Tahoe tourism impact strategies, but that is kind of where we're going with that. Transportation needs, different things like that. We've talked about transportation a number of times down here. Obviously, that's critical for us. But I just want to make sure under that destination management, if it's like, hey, these are the initiatives, well, that's not included in there, so we can't do that. So I want to recognize and go on record that there has to be an opportunity that this board's responsibility does travel up and over the hill, which I know everybody knows that, but that includes under this destination management needs. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. Mr. Ahmed, do you have any answers to that?
If the board wants that, we could add that as as an initiative as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Murdo.
I appreciate what we've done in our community in this whole region. We've diversified because we needed to. And gaming's always pulled the weight in the state. But it looks like to me that the gaming in Nevada is still staying pretty strong nationally as well. So I just want to make sure we never forget that gaming still it's your state coffers. So again, gaming and conventions that come into the gaming centers and the events that drive in customers, and some people come here and they don't gamble, but they stay and they eat in your restaurants and your facilities. So I think we really have to keep a clear vision that Nevada is what it is. We are gaming, and we have the best outdoor and recreation, but gosh dang it, we need to be gaming as well. And I love everything else. We need to be a great destination for the sports, and we need to be a great destination for arts, because I think those are all fall into line, but we can't forget what our state's funded by as well. And gaming is important to us.
Yes.
Not just recreation and outdoor activity.
Understood. And I want to share a couple things with everybody, with the board as well. And Mr. Ahmed, I want to go back and answer. I agree. Now, underneath the tactics under community engagement, we have, being active in planning and promotion of community improvement initiatives, engaging stakeholders, Washoe County, City of Reno, City of Sparks, Reno Tahoe Airport Authority, Travel Nevada, RTC, NDOT, and regional DMOs. But to Andy's point, I don't see Incline Village, Crystal Bay, Visitors Bureau on there. I don't see Incline Village GID, which is an elected board that represents all of Incline and all that transportation needs, and and even TRPA to an extent. And when we're talking about development of major properties and different things like that, all of those boards are involved. And to not educate those boards on the importance of tourism, what it brings to their community. I can tell you from Washoe County's standpoint, in the last 6 months, short-term rentals have been a big issue, 98% of those being in Incline Village. The expansion of potential properties, 2 properties in the Bay Area, in the basin that are going to be built and are underway, major developments. And yet we don't have 3 of the major boards listed on here as outreach to those boards in regards to how the room tax is going to impact that they're going to be sending out of the basin, but maybe not getting back directly to the basin. And remember, when we brand ourselves as Reno Tahoe, Tahoe being part of the name, most of our ads start with a beautiful, serenic picture of Lake Tahoe and then are followed up with a downtown picture of Reno and Sparks. Yeah. And so we have to understand that it has to be a balanced appreciation. So I absolutely understand where Mr. Chapman is coming from, and as a representative of the county, I want to point that out. Secondly, as we're doing budget week and whatnot, Washoe County just approved, for the first time ever, a $1 billion budget. A $1 billion budget that Washoe County is now overseeing. As and we're growing as a community, and not growing just in Reno, but in Sparks, Incline Village, you name it. And so we have to have a regional thought. But to Mr. Murdoch's point, we've actually done better as a region diversifying our economy, where you see from 2015, manufacturing jobs jumped 15% in Washoe County, where actually gaming jobs decreased, which was a challenge. And so we're diversifying our economy, so we need to make sure that we're focusing on these heads and beds. We need to make sure that we're spending time really branding the agency and bringing people, and that's why I'm pretty adamant about rewordsmithing the mission statement, because when we have a decrease in some of this traffic to the area because of diversification, now business travel is going to be a big thing and different things that we can do. It's not necessarily a decrease in the actual involvement in their economy. They're still predominantly the leader within the economy. However, it is now starting to balance out with every other industry. And when you don't have the absolute revenue or the drive to the properties to make sure that those properties are filled, and you have some of this mission creep, it provides for MPOs and different people like that to provide resources. Well, it's not necessarily putting heads in beds, it's providing money because it's subsidized through the county and different things like that, and that's not the case whatsoever. If it wasn't for the properties and it isn't for the focus of the VOI, where the visitors are coming from and what they're doing and how we're placing them and placing them efficiently, whether they're a conference, whether they're just organic tourism or whatnot, then we're not doing our jobs effectively. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so adamant about we got to make sure that we stick to our original mission and evolve the mission, but not necessarily just abandon it altogether, because mission creep, even though it's just a phrase, can provide for it's putting the camel's nose underneath the tent, and then all of a sudden things go sideways and you have everybody showing up looking for a paycheck, whether it's a wrestling association looking to build a facility, or Swift Orthopedics that wants to help with their sports dome because they think that means heads and beds, or because it's community sustainability. It doesn't necessarily really translate to actually people visiting here, but it does mean that now they have opportunity to come to this board through different venues to ask for money. And that provides me a little bit of, and as a steward of not only this board, but also of Washoe County, that gives me a little bit of angst to move forward with something like that.
Yeah, I apologize for those two oversights. I mean, I think it would be a pretty quick fix if we can make a change to the mission to be a much stronger reflection of the room night generation, sort of the economic contribution, and we could also add in destination alignment an initiative and tactics specifically related to some of the important, the other important areas in this community. Mr. Chair, one thing that I forgot to mention to you, and we had a discussion about this the last time, and we also do have a set of values that were developed here, and this was really a collaborative process with the management team, and we had input from the board as well. You asked us last time to put in one around people. So these are the sort of core values for the organization: collaboration, integrity, transparency, ambition, people. So sorry for not mentioning that earlier.
Mr. O'Malley, I did have one last question too, outside of, I kind of got sidetracked, but in the destination alignment as well, I was confused by the DMO network and a portion of the initiatives and the research unit of the initiatives. It sounds like DMO network would be just doing outreach to the other DMOs to share our brand, and can you expand upon that for me and kind of give me a little bit more insight to that? And then also the research unit, expand upon that for me.
Yeah, so the DMO network is really about, that's the second one here, is to get all of the DMOs in the region to work more closely in terms of positioning, developing the destination. And we are seeing that in many communities. There's that, it's
Are you talking locally specific?
Regionally.
Or how
regionally.
How big is that spread, I guess?
That differs in different areas, but that can be at a county or a multi-county area. And I know that you've done some work in that area already.
Yeah, so this is Charles Harris. The first stage of what we've done, Mr. Chair, is to activate the other regional DMOs in Northern Nevada, which includes actually Travel Nevada, who's scheduled to come in and to present. I think that's the first stage in that collaboration process. It might lead us down a road to maybe we co-op advertising to do programs to go after targeted audiences that we want to go to. It's really a comprehensive way that we can help promote the region using the different resources, whether it's advertising, marketing, content that helps this Northern Nevada region flourish. And so this is just the first stage of what we started this year, but there's more things that Mr. Jimenez will tackle in order for us to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the other thing that could end up doing is there could be opportunities for improved efficiency and not in terms of integration of operations, but for simple things like data purchase. And there's a major initiative here around business intelligence and research. Those regional DMOs, if you pool your resources in terms of doing there may be ways, and this is being tried in other counties, where the organizations are doing a group buy for information. Some of these new research platforms are very expensive, so to do it on a regional basis can actually save you a significant amount of money. Now, I hope my friend at Tourism Economics doesn't hear this, but that's the reality. That is a big opportunity, from an efficiency perspective.
So the follow-up to that is that from the last strategic plan that we did, we initiated the visitor origination initiative, or VOI. So we were trying to identify, we worked with all the properties, and Erica Olson and her father put that program together and built that and did that outreach and kind of already started that platform. Now that's obviously just with the information provided to us from the properties. That doesn't actually do actual outreach to organic tourism or STRs or any of the corporations. But is that really kind of the idea behind, Charles, is that kind of the idea behind the research?
It's absolutely one element to that, Mr. Chair. I think that there's a lot of, where I came from, the regional DMOs in those areas, and there was, there's like 12 or 14, pulled those resources to access data. So for argument's sake, our friend Adam Sachs and what he does, it's really expensive to get to Symphony and to tap into that. Or it might be VisaView to understand credit card purchases and what people are doing in the destination when it comes to. So there's a lot of different pieces of data that we need to create a funnel and synthesize that. And if there's ways that we can tap into our partners that we all win and are smarter marketers, the folks in Virginia City or Carson Valley or other folks would love to have that. And as we have larger budgets, it's efficiencies of business.
The best example of that is the Zartico platform that has a lot of positioning, sort of geolocational data. And there's no competitive implication there, because if you buy the data and somebody else, your visitors are going to outside of your jurisdiction anyways. So if somebody else buys it, they're going to be getting the same data. So that's an area specifically that you can get tremendous information now about sort of visitor behavior, spending patterns, even forward-looking booking patterns through some of these new platforms that can be done on a regional basis.
Go ahead. Andy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to just mention the Zartico, because that's one we're looking at right now. It is incredibly expensive for an organization like us. And so if we can use that type of a platform where we're all buying into it collectively, I know the airport is looking at that. RASC is currently trying to figure out a component that might be a Zartico, but it's really that cell phone data that's driving a lot of these conversations, because there's a lot of platforms out there. The good ones are very expensive, and we all can't afford them separately. But if we can go in with one, effort, that helps us as a smaller DMO.
Go ahead, Charles.
Mr. Chair, so I'm speaking for Christina Ernie, who's on the line, who has laryngitis, I think. I don't think she can speak real clear, so I'm getting a couple text messages. So we have re-engaged with a visitor profile study through destination analysts. We have just recently done that based upon some funding and direction to re-engage with that. And currently, we are paying for Zartico on our own. So if we can tap into that and find some efficiencies, we would be welcome to that. And that's part of what that whole DMO network is.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Mr. Chair.
Well, 1 second, and go ahead, Jessica. I'll let you go next. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay. No, I'm preaching to the choir on it. I think I love where the discussion's going on this more regional. Let me rephrase that. I think we have a few planks, right? I mean, Rick has addressed, I think our own gaming industry, we have a certain plank we're running with. But I think where we can share the efforts, and I think, honestly, as we get momentum, it casts out even farther. It's from Yosemite to, and again, that means longer stays. I think if we can, and again, I should know this, but if we're at a 2.3 night stay right now, and we can ultimately get to a 3.5 night, right? It's good for everybody. Yeah. And I think the region as a whole has never really hit it yet. We've not harnessed that. I'll let Jessica go, but I am prepared to make a recommendation to approve this, adding Andy's addressing the destination alignment management of Incline Village and Crystal Bay, and a tweak of the mission statement. I know I hesitate going down the rabbit hole, but just entertain me. I'm not a wordsmith. I'm a product of the Douglas County High School education system. So, but truly just adding the creation of room nights to support the sustainable growth of our communities to the power of travel, something in that range that just preempts that, hey, we've got to drive room nights. Otherwise, I think the mission looks good. But that's it, and I'll be quiet till the next.
Thank you.
Round.
All right, Jessica.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to the facilities or to the tactics, and appreciate all of our consultants' work on this. Probably sound like a broken record a little bit. And I think where we could use his help too, and I mentioned this during our retreat, if you go down to, and I guess just similar to what we're doing at the airport, we have a strategic master plan within the airport. And I go back to this board, and I actually read the entire last strategic plan as well, and the same issues keep coming up. And I think to go back to what Board Member Keel said, the image still, and you look at, for example, under tactics downtown, I think we voted for that committee like a year ago, and it still hasn't been implemented. So I think the timeline, it would be helpful when we see FY23 through FY25, that we really, if we have, I mean, at the airport again, we have, hey, this is when we're going to establish this and implement it. And maybe we don't need to reinvent the wheel. One of the things that's missing under the downtown is similar to Incline. There's a business improvement district that's funded. It's very well organized. Diverse members of the downtown, property owners down there, stakeholders. That may be, we may not need to reinvent the wheel. I know Chairman Lucy, you sit on that committee, so maybe we just get that established, but we voted on that a long time ago. So I'd just like to see some of these things established. And kudos to the local governments, reading about the homeless, the housing situation there and the decrease there. But I do believe we need a master plan. We should be working with the local governments on the master plan. This is the strategic plan, but we need a land master plan. And you go down to the next bullet, the convention center district. I think we're missing out on federal funds, potentially state funds. This is another one, creating that synergy. And I said it, the Virginia Street study is being implemented now, I believe out on the street, but we have, that goes all the way south. We have this convention center district. Infrastructure is so important. The last strategic plan said, hey, we can market all day long, but we still need that synergy around the convention center. It's been identified every single strategic plan that this board has done. What are we doing for infrastructure, beautification? We really need to be, and I said this last time, go out to hire a consultant on actually the land use plan that surrounds our tourism facilities. And Shannon too, that Mill Street corridor, working with RTC, just as important in Sparks, their beautification. If that was done through strategic land use master plans. So I would just like to see two things, I guess, at the downtown for the bid. And also it says bullet number 2 under the Convention Center District, establish Convention Center District Improvement Committee. I think that's very important. But I think both of these need that plan, the land use plan that goes along with that, so we can start. I think it's two different things, the strategic plan, and also I saw the community under, you have community engagement. I know you mentioned RTC there, but we can't forget about RTC and all of these bullet points here, because they are instrumental in, I mean, look at Midtown, look at Sparks, the 4th Street corridor, all these things. That transportation beautification is vital. And I just think that needs to be added along with the strategic actual, like maybe a roadmap of, okay, July, 2022, we're going to have this committee established and move in this direction. I think it'd be helpful for me as a board member to just narrow in on those timelines as far as implementation on some of these things. And I agree with the rest of the board on Mission, Tahoe, all of it. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Fraza. Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jessica, we heard you loud and clear when we had that meeting back in March, and even though we haven't put out an RFP, Mr. Ouimet and his group has already submitted a proposal for a destination master plan. And so part of that, what we need to look at is we obviously need to get some other bids to be in that consideration step, but that's something that we're looking forward to and possibly bringing back to the board as early as July as part of the next year's program and what the long-term impact is beyond the 3 years for the destination. So we heard you and we're working through that now.
Okay, perfect.
And Charles, can I just ask one clarification on that? It's possible because that Virginia Street study is on the street right now. I don't know if the southern portion from Plum on to, I'm sorry, my mind's going blank here. I guess it would be to McCarran, could potentially be added on to that, because that area of Virginia Street is just is important. So we would have a south connection, then through Midtown, then all the way up through the university, because Midtown and the university work's been done. But I think just that synergy and coordination now, if possible, would be great. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Silver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I'm of the belief you should pick a few things and be excellent at them rather than have a lot on your plate that you achieve mediocrity. So I think this is a great plan. It's very well outlined. But back to the original conversation about room nights, I think if we focus on what we're responsible for doing here, we should be cautious that we don't take so much on that we're not able to focus on a few things that we achieve with excellence. With that, I just want to point out that under destination management, where it has Convention Center District, I'm sitting next to Mr. Larraguetta, and I would not want to see him held responsible for creating more dining and shopping. There are many other groups in this community that are responsible for or working on getting dining and shopping, which we have a lack of generally, in terms of retail opportunities and such, but I don't think we're in a position as RSCVA to say we're going to make sure that in the next year or two there is more shopping. I appreciate what Ms. Ferraza has said. We've always wanted more amenities around the convention center other than, one coffee shop. It makes perfect sense what she's saying. But I think, once again, we have to contain ourselves and find some things that we're going to accomplish with oversight and fiduciary responsibility and do really well at them, rather than talking about everything going on in this community and landing this all on Mr. Larraguetta or other members of the RSCVA team. I just don't think that's appropriate. So I'm just going to highlight again, this is all about a tourism that results in room nights or overnight stays. And then organically, I think you will see the demand for retail and other entertainment and other things that happen. That's the way this community has grown all along, organically. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Silver. Councilwoman Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree, Ms. Silver, with what you were just stating. And really, if you look at the Convention Center District, I mean, I look at it like in the city of Sparks. We're trying to establish, and we have, the Victorian Square District. We're looking at the Audi District now. We eventually want a River District with housing and restaurants and dining. Those districts that we're looking to create, I'd look at it being public-private partnerships. I look at it being, the cities, obviously Convention District here would be City of Reno, would be, other private and public interests that we work together and collaborate with, and that I don't believe it's the RSCVA's responsibility, but absolutely for us, the enhancement of the Convention Center District enhances the experience for the visitors, for the conventions, for people who want to come back, and when they do, they've got a variety of options of what they can do within the district, as well as going to other parts of town, coming to Sparks, going up to the lake. But I think that can be accomplished through a regional collaborative effort that we really look, and the zoning and the master plan and land use kind of goes back to the city. It also sometimes comes to regional planning, and you look at the regional planning governing board and regional planning on land use and zoning for sure is the city, like it is in Sparks, but then bigger things come before regional planning on how those things can happen, and they do, but I think I see it as a collaboration of many different partners to see that happen. But I think it absolutely needs to. I mean, the convention center district is really just a convention center right now, and it really, the enhancements that as we move forward, I would love to see that happen, and I think we can.
If I could just make one final comment in response to what you said, I agree 100% with what you've said. One of the things that is really important each year when you're finalizing your annual business plan and looking at the priorities for that year is we always recommend for each of the initiatives, and even at the tactics level, is to be really clear, are you leading that initiative? Are you supporting that initiative, or are you just monitoring that initiative? So there's going to be many situations. We felt we needed to include some of these initiatives in here because we believe they're so important to the destination overall that they should be included, but it is not a recommendation that you should be leading in all 15 of those areas. That's just, I agree, that's not realistic given the resources and the capabilities of the organization.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been a wonderful conversation this morning, and I want to just answer a few questions in regards to what I've heard too, and then I'm going to make a motion here. Are we going to move? Do we want to approve the strategic, or do we want to do the marketing and finance division before we approve the entire motion? I mean, before we approve the entire strategic plan? I guess not. Nope. No, we'll do that. We're fine. Okay. So. Some small things. As we talk about facilities, Ms. Silver and Ms. Fraza and Councilwoman Bybee, in 2016, this organization did hire the Johnson Group to do a study of the convention center, which we could dust off. It's only a few years old, but it's not too bad, and not too much has changed in that area around the convention center when we initially talked about taking a legislative bill for the expansion of the convention center. I would agree that all four facilities need a master plan. And when we talk about in the tactics here in regards to what Ms. Silver is talking about, we talk about facilities and convention center districts and whatnot. I think you're right, we get a little bit too diverse. I think that really comes back and falls under community engagement, because we, under our purview, have no control over, to what Ms. Bybee says, is zoning, what goes in there. We're not going to incentivize restaurants. That's not going to be anything we can do. And to Ms. Silver's point, having Mike run around and try to conduct citizen meetings or business meetings does not make any sense. So that kind of deters from his, but it does fit into our strategic plan, is that is a goal, so that when we can participate, we should participate in some meaningful fashion. A master plan would probably be better, very similar to what the Johnson Group did for us in 2016 in regards to maybe all of our facilities as a facilities master plan, as that pertains to our actual CIP, because we have a ton of deferred maintenance at all of our facilities that need to be addressed, and that would be best suited by Mr. LaFeria in his ability to assess what we need to do, see what we have in our budget, and then go about it, and then approach that with the operations subcommittee, which we already have under the finance board and operations. So those are my suggestions to this. So all good conversation today. I want to take a stab at a motion based upon my discussions with Mr. Kennedy and having some further conversation here and kind of retaining everything. What I'd like to do is approve the strategic plan today with the simple changes that are suggested, but actually not make those amendments today here. So just approve the plan, but not approve the mission statement as drafted, and have Mr. Omet and Mr. Harris go back and re-wordsmith the current mission statement with the addition of suggestions from the board to include, but continue to retain our current mission statement as drafted and with the new strategic plan as presented today, with amendments to be brought back at a later time and date after those have been addressed with the Tahoe initiatives, the facilities initiatives, and kind of the overall governance that I think we should bring back. So that is my motion to the board. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
I have a second from Mrs. Silver. We have no public comment, I don't believe, on this. I'll move forward with the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I appreciate everybody. Mr. Omet, thank you so much for your coming today. I appreciate your time. And then that is it for that.
Can you hear?
Yes. Madam Mayor.
Oh, sorry, you were moving too fast. I tried to jump in on discussion. First of all, I just, and now after we voted, it's a little, it doesn't matter. These are just comments. And I think everyone will understand this. First of all, I want to say 100% we need a master plan. And second of all, what I think a big piece of this that's missing is the infrastructure on the city and the county side. I think there's always been this thought that, oh, the RSCVA will do it. It all has to be encompassing with our infrastructure. One of the things we don't even talk about hardly, where I get really frustrated, is the asset of our river. And I mean, when you talk about like San Antonio, Texas, people will always say, oh, the river walk, right? A lot of people don't say that about our river, but it runs right through the city. It's something that really attracts visitors on every level, and it touches all of us, whether it's Reno, Sparks. I mean, right on down to Shannon has even offered, to help on their side of the river, right? So these kinds of things where it's all encompassing, and the infrastructure is going to be really, really big. There are a lot of moving pieces to obviously tourism. It's complex, and what drives it. I think everyone makes some really, really good points, but I still feel, and Shannon also talks about it, what is really sort of the brand that people perceive us on the outside. And one of the things, Paul, first of all, I want to say I think you did an amazing job. Really, I feel like it's the closest that we've been to understand sort of where we're going as a region. But one of the things, and I don't know if you did this, Paul, but maybe a survey, I would like to see in some capacity what priorities the board thinks, from 1, 2, 3, 4, what that looks like versus maybe what a visitor wants to see. I think it'd be interesting to do some comparison on that. And I think it would probably be fairly easy to get. But I would like to see, so we can kind of all see what board members are thinking when it comes to their absolute top priority. Because maybe for Shannon, it is room nights. And maybe for Ann, it's building, our workforce talent. I don't know. I'd kind of like to understand that. And maybe it's based on the industry that we're in, because I try to really look at it very broad, but it has to be a master plan. Because remember, I'm coming from a place, I don't represent a casino. I don't, I think that it has to be all encompassing, and a master plan is the only way I truly think that it's going to get us there.
Thank
So
you,
that's just my two thoughts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Mr. Chair.
I think they're well received. Yeah, Ms. Safraza.
I do want to address, because I think it's two different things, and I appreciate your comments, Ms. Silver. I'm not talking about the RSCVA getting into the restaurant business. What I was talking about is exactly what Chairman Lucy said and Mayor Sheedy said about a master plan. That's what we did at the airport. Now we're implementing that master plan. Just a quick example, just so I can clarify, like all around the city, you have tourist commercial zones. And I just feel like the RSCVA's got to have input on it. What uses, for example, there may be prohibited uses in these corridors that we would want to address when it comes to our tourism facilities. That was done with the Midtown plan. That's been done, I'm sure, in Sparks. So it's not us it's not us getting in the restaurant business. It's just being involved in a master plan, a tourism master plan that can go hand in hand with some of the land use policies with our local government. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I think, Mr. Chair, you understood where I was going with that.
Yes, thank you, ladies. And what we'll do is we'll work with Mr. Omet and Mr. Harris to make sure that those are identified. And I'm getting a nod from Mr. Omet right now that, and go ahead, Mr. Omet, if you want to add anything.
Just the last comment. I'm totally behind what you're saying here because for 15 years, my previous company, I was at Intervistas Consulting, and I did master planning work for airports. So I totally understand what you're talking about here in terms of, airside, land use, terminal planning. And I think that's what we're seeing now more and more is what's being done for communities in terms of tourism as well. And that infrastructure component is really one of the critical sort of barriers to growth for so many of us. It's foundational for customer experience. It's also the underpinning for a lot of the opposition to growth in tourism for over-tourism. So those pieces all have to be looked at, I think, in an integrated fashion to really move destinations forward today. So thank you for those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Omet. We do
Thank you.
appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will move forward. And what I'm going to do prior to our next order of business, we have a couple items on here that are pretty mundane and very simple issues. And if there isn't any kind of abstention to it, I'm going to recommend that we place items G2, G3, I1, and I2 into a block vote this morning to just move through those systematically so that we can kind of move through some of our other regular business prior to the remainder of the meeting. We do have to get through our budget hearing today, and we have we do have the special events funding. So we've got a lot of things that are pretty significant we need to deal with. So I'd like to put those in block if there's no objections to that this morning. Looking around. Those would be items G2, items G3, I1, and I2. So I'll read those. I will read all those items into the record right now so that that is on the record for a block vote, and then we will take that if there is any, if there's no objections. Is there a second? First of all, I'll move and ask for, is there a second to put those into a block?
I'll second.
I have a motion, a second from Mr. Chapman. We have so under block this morning, under items G2, it's review, discussion, and possible action to renew the Noble Studios contract for website and digital marketing services. The board is being asked to review the approval of an annual contract with Noble Studios for website maintenance and performance enhancements, website template development, search engine optimization strategy and service, and user website optimization strategy for fiscal year 22 through 23 in the amount not to exceed $250,000. Items G3 is review, discussion, and possible action regarding the contract extension for Decker Royal Agency, the Visit Reno Tahoe's public relations agency of record. This board is being asked to review and approve the contract extension for Decker Royal Agency, the public relations agency of record for Visit Reno Tahoe, and the amount not to exceed $114,000 per year. The current contract will expire on June 30th of 2022. This approval of this item would extend the term to June 13, 2024. Items I1 would be a review, discussion, and possible action to approve the Fourth Amendment to the agreement dated June 13th, 2012, by and between the Reno Sparks Convention Visitors Authority, RSCVA, City of Reno, Nevada, identified as Reno, the United States Bowling Congress, otherwise known as USBC, and 2, authorize the president and CEO to execute the fourth agreement. The board is being asked to review the Fourth Amendment to the agreement between the RSCVA, City of Reno, and the USBC, including recommendations for the facility upgrades, renovations to the National Bowling Stadium in exchange for 3 additional tournaments, specifically the 2029 Open Tournament, the 2030 Women's Tournament, and the 2032 Open Tournament. Items I2, this is review and discussion for possible action to approve the staff's recommendation to award the request for a proposal RFP 2022-03 for security services of the National Bowling Stadium, the Reno Event Center, the Reno Sparks Convention Center, and the Reno Sparks Livestock Event Center, and the RSCVA's administrative offices. The board is being asked to review and possibly approve the staff's recommendation to award RFP 2022-03 related to the security services in the National Bowling Stadium, the Reno Event Center, Reno Sparks Convention Center, Reno Sparks Livestock Event Center, the RSCVA administrative offices to ESI Security Services, Inc., based on the financial terms set forth in the schedule of fees included in the meeting materials. Those are the items being placed into the block this morning. I have a motion and a second. Is there any public comment on any?
Mr. Chair, I have a disclosure.
Okay.
I'm sorry, on one
Member
item.
Sofrazo, go ahead.
I'm sorry, the first bowling contract, I'm trying to flip over to my
I-1?
disclosure here. I believe it, yes, I-1. Let me just pull up this disclosure, sorry. If I could on that item, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a disclosure for the record on this agenda item. The matter before us affects my commitment in a private capacity to my employer, the Row. The Row has been and expects to continue to be a presenting sponsor and headquarters hotel for the bowling tournaments covered by this contract. However, the Row is not a party to this contract, and this contract does not obligate bowlers to stay at or patronize the Row. The Row's sponsorship relationship with the United States Bowling Congress likewise does not obligate bowlers to stay at or patronize the Row. Bowling tournaments are significant drivers of tourism to Washoe County, and like other major tourist events, these tournaments financially benefit many hotels, casinos, bars, restaurants, and retail establishments. For all of those reasons, I believe that a reasonable person in my situation would not be materially affected by the Row's sponsorship of the bowling tournaments covered by this contract, and in consultation with legal counsel, I therefore believe this is not a disqualifying conflict of interest and will be voting on this matter. Please, Mr. Chairman, enter my disclosure for the public record. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sofraza. We will place your disclosure on the record for permanency, and I do not see any ethical disqualification for your ability to vote on items I-1, being that Mr. Murdoch also is included in that. Mr. Kennedy, do you want to confirm that?
Do I have to repeat that whole thing?
No, I believe that we will just say ditto for you.
Can I just second the disclosure?
Yes, you can second the disclosure as an employee of the Row. I think that does not disqualify you either from taking that initiative. So with that being said, those disclosures being offered, I have a motion and a second to place all four items into a block vote this morning. I'll call for the vote. All those in.
One question.
Yes, go ahead. In discussion, Mr. Squaga.
Yeah, in regards to I-1, just to clarify, what, in regards to the facility upgrades we're committing to, and again, without trying to totally sidetrack, this might be a Trent question. What is the scale of, what are we agreeing to?
Mr. Larriga, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mike Larriga for the record. So over the last few months, we've been in negotiations with USBC as it relates to their requested capital ask on the NBS for improvements and upgrades to the facility. We met internally with our staff. We met with the city of Reno. And in their ask, what we come to a conclusion and agreement with the USBC is for improvements to the facility is to replace the projector and the scoreboard at an estimated cost of $1.5 million, which will be covered by the surcharge. As a gesture of goodwill, we made a recommendation to complete that prior to the 23 open tournament. And then the second ask, which we agreed with USBC, was a replacement of the 78 lanes on the fourth floor and the 10 lanes in the Kingpin area. Those would be completed by 2029. The estimate as of today for that expense was about $1.5 million. So for all in between the 2023 replacement or upgrades and the 2029 is an estimated $3 million.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Harris.
And just for clarification on that, when the subcommittee met on the Finance Committee, there was an allocation that was agreed upon for the projector that would go into the budget, which we will discuss later, for $250,000 towards the 1.5. So that was proposed and accepted by the subcommittee when we reviewed.
Mr. Murdoch?
Yeah, one more point I just want to make, and I appreciate that, Stephen. The $2 fund does most of the capital, so it's real simple. You're just not tying us to the RSCVA. The thing is, when you look at the bowling agreement real quick, there's a site fee that the RSCVA writes a check for $900,000 approximately for, this is the open coming, so it's $900,000. The lineage that we charge the bowlers that the RSCVA gets is about $850,000, so kind of a wash. Then the properties that do house, we pay a $10 fee to the RSCVA. So basically, when they do the site fee, it's covered by all of us. It's not written out of the coffers of the RSCVA. It is, but it isn't. And so I want to make that clear that this isn't, we're not on a free ride here, and whether you did the Safari Club or you do any Interbike, any of these site fees, you may not get the recovery like you do, but sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But we do tax ourselves to keep this here. And also any sponsorships we do, totally outside of anything the RSCVA does.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the clarification. Mr. Larragata.
Yeah, just to provide clarity for the board, the numbers that Mr. Murdoch is referencing were based on an open tournament. Obviously, those change based on whether it's an open or a women's. So the site fees is a $30 per unique bowler fee. The lineage is a negotiated $2 amount per game bowled, and the hotel rebate is based on a consumed room night based on an agreement between the RSCVA and the participating properties.
All right. Any members
on? Mr. Chair.
Ms. Safraza.
Just two quick questions, Mr. Larragata. How many, what's the economic impact of this event? And how many bowlers are we expecting? And isn't this the largest convention that Washoe County has, are the bowlers?
For the record, Mike Larragata, Ms. Safraza, yes, it is. The open tournament, it varies per year. Obviously, we're coming out of a pandemic. This is the first major open tournament since the pandemic. The USBC is estimating a number anywhere from 70 to 80,000 room nights over the course of the tournament for this open. In terms of economic impact, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'll happy to pull those through Mr. Douglas based on past tournaments and provide that to the board. But to answer your question, yes, this is the largest single event that will consume within Washoe County in terms of a convention, and I think the history of the RSCVA.
Thank you.
Further discussion?
Well, no discussion. This contract runs from 26 through 32 now. We just added 3 more years, but we have them here, obviously, extended past 26. They're here next year in 23, which is the open. And I'm just using an old number, but I think the economic impact somewhere around 50 million. But I think we need to update that. But when you look at a bowling congress, you look at golf courses, you look at restaurants, you look at airlines. I think we really need to, this type of a convention, or call it a bowling event, brings so much diversity to the economies, and it does float all boats. Everybody gets to charge higher room rates. So it's a heck of an economic impact to the community.
Mr. Chair, if I...
Yeah, go ahead.
Rhonda Leach, who is unfortunately not in person today, just sent me a text, and she is stating that the economic impact since 2012 is approximately $455 million in terms of what they've driven to the destination.
Wow. Okay. So I don't want to get too far off track here. I know the conversation is fantastic, and I want to hear it all. I think we all should have time, but I'm trying to block this so we can expedite some of this. So if there are questions, let's have those questions. Are there any further questions under discussion under the block vote? I think everything's been asked. All right. I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. 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 All those opposed, motion carries unanimously on those 4 items. With that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Harris for item G1. This is the 2022-2023 Special Events Partnership Funding Recommendation Award Allocations.
All right, I'm going to set the table and turn it over to Ben McDonald, who's going to walk us through. This is discussion and possible approval of the budget for 2022-2023 special event funding from the original $500,000, which has been allocated in the new budget. I'm going to turn it over to Ben McDonald, our Director of Communications, who's going to walk through in further detail and then open it up for discussion. Ben?
Thank you. Good morning. Ben McDonald, Communications Director for RSCVA for the record. Sorry I can't be with you this morning. As a precaution, I've been asked to stay away from other humans for a few days. This is related to G1, Special Event Partnership Funding, and the internal panel award recommendations. This is related to the funding guidelines that have been in effect and amended since the program was approved in 2007. For this year, 37 events applied by the deadline, which was January 13th, 2022, representing over $1.1 million in requests. The internal Special Events Partnership Funding Panel met on April 20th, and this recommendation includes funding for 34 of those events, one of which canceled, and two of which of those other events the panel is recommending to the board's forthcoming Special Events Committee, which we would ask them to analyze as part of this recommendation due to, one, the size of the ask of those two specific events, and also the fact that they are brand new events. In total, the panel is recommending $440,000 out of that $500,000 special event fund be awarded today, which would leave $60,000 in the opportunity fund should other opportunities arise throughout the fiscal year. These monies, I want to reiterate, are just out of the pre-approved $500,000 partnership funding budget, not the additional $500,000 that the board approved earlier this year, which we anticipate will be directed by that newly formed committee. So staff is recommending approval of the distribution as presented in your packets, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Are there any questions by any board members in regards to the special events funding and allocations that have been recommended by staff this morning? Members,
Mr. Chair,
quickly. Go ahead. Hold on, Mayor Sheeby. I have Ms. Silver first, and then I will go to you, ma'am.
Just a quick question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Am I reading correctly that recommendations in the recommendation is to award nothing to the Barracuda Championship? Is that correct? And is that due to the fact?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Question to you.
Yeah, that's correct. So the funding application and requirements for this fiscal year were amended to include events that occur only in Washoe County.
Thank you.
All right. Mayor Sheeby.
Yeah, I also want to understand what we provide in sponsorships, right? So whether it's funding or sponsorships or in-kinds, things like that, I haven't seen sort of a breakdown and also how we prioritize some of those sponsorships, because obviously it's probably easier to do more in-kinds because we have the facilities and they're probably open to other events during that same time, or, things like that. So I'd like to understand a little bit about sponsorships, what those look like, how they work, and maybe get like the last year's sort of sponsorships versus like 2019 when we were in business, what those kind of look like, and see sort of what are the options on the in-kinds and sponsorships along with the funding.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mayor Sheeby. We do take all that into account during the panel process. I don't have all that information in front of me this morning, but I think that's something we could really take a close look at with that committee of the board, because I would anticipate that the board would take a look at the entirety of the $1 million that we're putting towards special events now. And it'd be a great opportunity to really revisit this, take a closer look at what those in-kind amenities and concessions look like, and figure out where we can better put our dollars. But for the time being, for this year, this was basically the outline, and so we've tried to stay true to how we've been running this program for the last 10 years or so. So I apologize that we don't have all those in-kind expenses in front of you today, but that is all taken into consideration when the panel.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking as we move forward, because I know like in my business, it's obviously a lot easier if I give merchandise versus, cash, right? Because it costs me a lot less. So I kind of, for the future of like what that looks like, and maybe Ben, you could provide me with the sponsorships of the last year and then sponsorships of 19, and I could kind of go through those and see how, they sort of work and how they're structured. And I think how we can implement those to actually make our resources and our dollars go further. But good job, Ben. Thanks. And I hope you're not sick. And if you are, I hope you feel better.
No, I'm feeling great. Just a precaution on my part. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Mr. Murdoch.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, hold on one second. I'm going to Mr. Murdoch first, and then I'll go to Ms. Fraza.
Hey, Ben, I'm just looking and I got to ask the question. When you look at the zombie crawl or the Santa crawl, why is Pumpkin Palooza getting nothing? That's no different than those.
So we did revisit that, and it really came down to the room nights that were reported and that are represented in the application. And just because an event is getting X amount this year really doesn't have any bearing on the following year. And Tasha Holloway, who has been out on maternity leave, does a really great job throughout the year of communicating with the special events. So we're hopeful that that event will grow. Certainly, even in the funding application, it is very heavily locally attended, and the room nights necessarily for this year did not constitute, we thought, as an internal panel, appropriate funding.
The question I'd have for you then is, if you ever get to a point where Hot August Night started with nothing, so we have to start somewhere, and an event needs help. That's how it was always done. So I'm a little, like I said, it doesn't resonate on this for me, just for the record.
And to your point, Mr. Murdoch, I completely understand where you're coming from, and we do have that, we approached it a little bit differently this year because there is that $500,000 fund that, obviously we as an internal panel, we're not going to touch. That's fully at the discretion of the board. So, we would like to take some of these events that maybe are being underfunded or that the board sees as being underfunded or priorities and take that back to the board in that committee and have them take a closer look at that and make that determination that this is something that's going to grow. We believe in this, and we're going to give them X dollars based on these recommendations. We would love to revisit that with the committee.
Mr. Fraza, go ahead. You're
on the legacy, Mr. Chair. And I know that, I guess, question for staff, if one of these events doesn't happen, what would happen to the funding? Would it go back into the special events fund for next year, which is $1 million for new fiscal year? What would happen to the funding?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. So that funding would come back. We pay half typically before the event and then pay the other half after the event. If an event doesn't occur, they don't get funding, and that gets rolled back into the current fiscal year's budget as part of additional opportunity funds. And we'll look for opportunities through the remainder of the fiscal year to try to direct those funds back to another special event that possibly has not received any other funding.
Okay, and then specifically, the reason why I asked that is on the air races. I do know in consulting with the airport, I'm not sure if they were able to secure their insurance. So that's a big chunk of money, the $125,000. So I just want to make sure that if something were to happen there, that those funds would still stay and I don't know if staff has any information on that or updated information. I guess insurance costs are they're really going through the roof. And at the airport, we have to make sure things are insured, obviously, to protect the assets. So I don't know if staff has heard any update on that particular event, but just wanted to know what would happen to those funds. It's quite a large amount of money if that event didn't occur this year.
Yes, at this point, I can tell you certainly, this funding has not been approved yet, so everything is still in pocket. It doesn't start till July. So nothing's been spent. We haven't heard anything about the insurance, but if they don't meet their qualifications, then yeah, we will not spend that money. Certainly, there hasn't been any checks issued as of yet for the next fiscal year. And so we'll definitely be monitoring that closely. That would roll back into the special events fund, and hopefully we could find another opportunity, and hopefully that committee could help us direct those funds.
And then just one more question for clarification.
Jessica, can I jump in really quick here? Just so I want to give everybody a little bit more understanding before we kind of continue down a path here. So in the staff report, there is a special event funding panelist award that is a recommendation from the staff to the board for a recommended understanding, and that total is $440,000. The board, as the way the agenda is drafted, we can allocate up to $500,000. So there is a delta of $60,000 that is available for distribution. Now, the board could allocate under the tenets of the reasoning of finding within the staff report, which is uniqueness, all of the tenets in which the staff panel reviews these. They could find a fund. They could find under utilizing one of those tenets or findings to establish. But what I would caution is that if you were to award, if the board were to decide on some of these events that they felt were either underfunded or not funded through this process, that $60,000 could be allocated today and move forward if thought. But you couldn't go further. What I would recommend is that you wouldn't go further above what the actual recommended was and stay underneath that recommended amount and stay within that level. But remember, you have $60,000 available to be allocated today if the board sees fit, in addition to what has been recommended. So with that being said, if that gives you hopefully some extra clarity to some opportunities or options moving forward, that is an option to the board if we so see fit.
So Bob, that was going to be my question, Mr. Chair, is if instead of doing it like piecemeal, and maybe Charles to clarify, because we haven't set up the special event committee yet, are these for events for July 2022 through 2023? And could we potentially, if staff, when are we opening up applications for new events? Because if we had public comment on some stuff, would there be a possibility to fund additional events this fiscal year if we opened it back up and had staff I prefer staff review the applications. I like this because they vet them and they give us the recommendation.
Right. And Mr. Fraza, and one of the discussions that we had is that was going to be coming back under the construct of the new special events committee to reevaluate the actual committee standards and in regards to what those requirements would be, because I think every board member had chimed in at some point about how that process should go, when those applications should be available. So that process is coming back, and we are in the process of working with staff to develop that. That has not been, so that would probably be something to be discussed in the next fiscal year, that allowance in the next fiscal year. But this is because we need to ratify this budget prior to, because this is that process. So this would be, potentially there would be that $1 million available in next year's fiscal year because it has been allocated in the budget, but just hasn't been identified what the process is going forward and what that would look like. Mr. Harris.
I guess what I'm saying, I would prefer on the 60, and if another event didn't happen and the money went back, that the committee that's established vets that, and then we can make our recommendation based on that. That's all I was saying, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
If there were additional funds, the 60 grand or another event, that the committee and staff had the opportunity to vet those, and then potentially there's more events that would be happening this next fiscal year. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Fraza. Mr. Harris, do you?
Yeah, just real quick, Jessica, just to kind of recap, this funding is for the next fiscal year, so 22-23. Just like we had in the previous year's budget going into this year, there was that, it's $60,000 now that is an opportunity fund for new events that could apply, that could be considered for that. That's all part of that process. In addition to support what the chair said, we were asked to submit names for that subcommittee, which we've done to the chair. Now, I know he's got to work with Ben because there was potential conflict of interest of how many people sat on how many subcommittees, which has to be vetted through the legal. Then we can meet and then figure out and present to the subcommittee what that looks like for the other 500,000. Hopefully that's clear.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you. And Ben, thank you for the information. I support everything you have in here. My question was a little bit about the marketing opportunity funds of that 60,000. And could you give me a brief synopsis of how that process works? Is it a first come, first serve? If I knock on your door first kind of thing? You know, how does that process work to apply for these opportunistic funds of the 60,000? Thank you.
Yeah, so typically those type of requests will either come through to marketing or will come through to a board member who knows that those funds exist, and they will be evaluated just like any other event. And then typically we would go to the board anyway, but I think now with the committee coming online, our plan as an internal panel was to take those requests immediately to the board with analysis from staff to make recommendations and allow that committee to discuss it. Those don't all require full board approval because of the dollar amounts and because that the budget is already approved. That $60,000, if it goes through, is already going to be approved for this use. But I think we would prefer to take that to the committee and allow them an opportunity to make recommendations on that.
Ms. Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the additional 500,000 we're looking at would come before the committee that we're establishing, and possibly that 60,000. I like having the opportunity fund because we've only done this once a year, and we get things that come in off cycle. I like having something in an opportunity fund that if someone comes in and needs additional funding and hasn't applied, that we have the opportunity to do that, like TEDx came into us before. On the 500,000 that we do have remaining, I'm looking at all, and I think we all agreed, a lot of these criteria are something that need to be reevaluated. I think with the Barracuda, it's out of Washoe County, but it directly impacts our region, just the amount of exposure we get, the media we get from the Barracuda is huge. So when they were at Montreux, we could fund them, and now they moved up the road and over the state line out of Washoe County, and under this, we can't. So I think that, and the room nights are important, but then I look, as we're looking at our strategic plan and looking at community connections, Pumpkin Palooza, yes, doesn't generate the room nights because it is primarily local, and we have other local events too that could use funding, not for their whole event, but some assistance, and maybe we look at something like Pumpkin Palooza, which has grown exponentially, as a really good place to show our local community that who RSCVA is. They support Pumpkin Palooza, which yes is local, but as we look at what criteria we look at under the new committee, kind of something to take into consideration. All of the things, but room nights would just be one piece of it because most of these generate a lot of room nights. And obviously I'm looking for events in Sparks, and right now I only see the Dragon Boat Festival as the only thing being funded that's in Sparks. And there's more events at Tahoe, there are more events in Reno for sure. But I do appreciate the vast array and the cross-section of sports and culture and alcohol on our crawls and the beer fest. But kind of, I appreciate, Ben, that there's a lot of diversity in what you have chosen to fund, and I think that's something that we need to continue as well, and I look forward to revamping kind of our criteria so that we have more flexibility for events as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
And if I may,
go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
If I may, Councilwoman, I do believe there's a couple other events in Sparks. I think Legends of Beer is taking place at Legends. And then I believe, I'm sorry, I'm looking through. I know we talked about the Lantern Festival also, which may be coming back. And if it's not being, I can't remember if it's funded here, but that would be something that we would take to the committee as well. I think they just weren't definite yet, possibly. But to your other point with the criteria, we definitely do want to bring that back to the committee and work through, have a workshop and go through the criteria and get some broader perspective on what's important for funding these events. But one of the pieces that we also take into consideration is, does this event need the funding? How long are we required to fund an event that's doing well and making money and doesn't necessarily need these public funds to stay solvent? So that also goes in to consideration when we're looking at how best to direct these funds. And then there's also, I want to remind everybody, there's 2 additional events there that met the application deadline, excuse me, that we haven't funded, that we would like to recommend over to the board, to the committee, excuse me, to take a look at that, because they were very large asks and they're brand new events, and we do see a lot of value there. But we wanted to make sure that we were also funding these other events that we felt needed this funding to keep going, because it is, it's all about having enough events to fill the calendar to have the greatest impact on room nights, ultimately. So, we definitely do want to recommend those 2 events to the committee. So please keep that in mind as you look at these recommendations. That I think the total ask for those was about 170,000. About 169,000.
169,000.
The ask on that. So we wanted to defer that to the committee due to the size, the timing, and the fact that they're new events.
All right. Mr. Murdoch.
Just remind the board that there is events that do have, when we talk about the committee and things, we got to look at a startup date and a finish date when they stand alone. For the record, the Italian Festival and the Brew Festival does not come to the RSCVA for anything other than you guys put us on your website. I just want to make a point that whether it was Randy Burke or whoever with Street Vibrations, that if they become financially viable, at one point do they get off of our funding and we get onto the new funding. So I want to bring that back to the committee and say, yeah, okay, here's the timeline on each event. You just can't keep funding the same event every year, because all the event planners, some of them that are private events, they are funded, they make money. So we shouldn't be having to subsidize everything. Just for the point.
And Mr. Murdoch, to your point, and I think that has been my frustration with special events, is that at one point, do you become no longer a legacy event where we're looking for sponsorship? Because are we buying, instead of us subsidizing you to put on an event, should we just be supporting your event because you've become so well endowed as an event? Do we buy in as a marketing to utilize you as more of a vehicle than us being the vehicle for you? And so it changes. So that's why these special events shouldn't be necessarily a legacy event. That should now become a marketing cost about how can we contribute from marketing into an event, because they've become so self-sustainable, where we look at Barracuda not necessarily for using them money, but we're using them that they are highlighting our community and they are using room nights, but they're not necessarily utilizing our funding for special events, which through our special events funding only dictates how they can spend it. To Mayor Sheevy's point, we have to make sure that it's not in kind, not through these different things. So that's one of the reasons why I want the Special Events Committee to really look at this and dive deep. The legacy events should be looked at as a partner now, not as an opening event, where special events should be, to Councilwoman Bybee's point, more community involvement. How do we bring those in? What does that mean to evolution of the RSCVA? And so that's where not only does the tenants and the kind of qualifications of special events come in, but when do you really move on from a special event to a marketing partner, so to speak, to develop your abilities within the community? Mr. Esquaga.
No, I think it's a great, we've been having these discussions, right? It evolves. I do think your point is spot on. I look forward to kind of seeing what the committee brings back. I'm assuming that the committee will bring it back to the group to kind of for one final blessing. I think, there's a few different buckets here, and I think there's a community bucket, and maybe that's exactly how it's termed, that it's not going to be a big room night driver. This is a goodwill. There's probably needs to be a cap on it as well. I mean, maybe it's $2,500. Does the same application go to them? How many times? Maybe it goes into perpetuity. If it's Pumpkin Palooza and it's good for Victorian Square, there's a side of it, at $2,500, I'm all right. Some of these numbers get thrown out, and I'm familiar with it because we requested it back in the days of the rib cook-off and many others. But I agree with Rick and yourself, Mr. Chair, that at some point, it probably rolls into a marketing piece that the RSCVA runs with. The other piece, and I know we've talked about it different times, but is that what bucket is in that seed money to go after something that can really move a needle? And again, this, I don't want to get into personal, this event drives it, this doesn't, but I think we want to have that certain amount of dry powder to say, how do we bring something in? I know a little bit on one of these that were still TBD. It has potential to kind of go, hey, that could lead into something. That might get traction, and again, hopefully turn into a marketing partnership. But no, I think I'm looking forward to seeing where the committee comes back and we can kind of hash this out. And as far as Ben and the committee's recommendation, I'm good with what's being proposed, quite honestly, with the 440.
And you look at the zombie crawl and the Santa crawl, those started as local events, and now there's thousands I will be honest, the Row gets a ton of rooms from the sponsorship. So at some point, it becomes local and then it becomes out of town and it's all because of what, Charles, you and RSCVA have done when you sent the emails and you blasted over what's going on in Reno, Nevada out all around. It becomes a cross-pollinated event where you have local and then you have out of town. So just thoughts there for the committee and you guys that you got to start somewhere, but there's also got to be a shot clock. So thank you.
You're welcome. So, I'm sorry, I have a hard out in 30 minutes, so I'd like to try to move this along. I think the conversation has been really significant in regards to the discussion this morning about special events, and I will make sure that gets relayed back to that committee, and that when that formation is finalized, we will move forward with that, because those are the things that we need to address, the kind of the tiered understanding, everything like that. But I want to bring us back to making sure that we're okay with the special event funding as allocated this morning. If there's any changes that you'd like to look to send back to staff for consideration under that 60,000, this would be your opportunity to do so. If not, then we can move forward with this and keep the 60,000 as potential for open opportunities. So at this time, looking for a motion to move forward.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the distribution recommendations for the 2022-23 Special Event Partnership Funding as the staff has presented and keep the 60,000 as a opportunistic fund.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion. Do I have a second for Mr. Murdoch? Seeing no further discussion on this item, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously with all members voting. All right, we are now, ladies and gentlemen, we are on to item H1. This is Miss Courtney Yeager. She will be presenting this we are on to our finance section. Welcome to our budget week. Things that I look forward to at the end of May. And this is a presentation, discussion, and possible approval of the Reno Sparks Convention and Visitors Authority Capital Improvement Plan for fiscal 2022-23. Now, Ms. Yeager, before we go into this, do we want to do the budget first? Because the approval of the budget would be allowing you to approve and ratify the capital improvement plan. Do you want to do those in reverse? And I thought about it after I looked at the agenda and thought, but what would you like to do?
That would work. The capital plan has the detail of what will be spent when the board approves the budget overall, so either order would work.
So I guess my point is if you don't approve the budget as presented, the capital improvement plan does not really get augmented that way. So do you want to do it in reverse, or which way would you like to do it?
Let's go ahead and do it in reverse. And that way, if the board, we can approve the budget itself, and if the board has changes to the capital plan, that could come back later.
Yeah, let's do that. Can we
works
do
for
that?
me.
Because that makes me feel a little bit more safe and sound and secure about, not that we're not going to ratify the budget, but if there's changes to it, we got to look at it.
Sounds great. I'll
All
just
right.
need 1 minute to set up, and we can go. And so I guess you'll sit and come back up.
While she's setting up, everybody has been presented with your budget book. I think this is mine. Everybody's got your budget book in front of you. If you have any questions on that, Ms. Yeager will be able to answer those questions for you. Can everybody online see the proposed budget? Jessica and the mayor?
No.
No, not yet?
No. Can't show, yeah, nothing's coming through.
All right, they're working on it. Give us a second here.
Good morning. Courtney Jager, Vice President of Finance. Today I'm presenting to you the President and CEO's proposed budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. First is our agenda for this presentation. We'll start off by reviewing a recap of the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting that was held to review the budget. We'll review the funding policies in place per the strategic plan. Next, we'll review general fund revenues and resources, general fund expenses, and we'll review the RSCVA's other funds. I'll move through this presentation at a good pace, but feel free to stop me anytime for questions. As part of our budget process, we present the budget in detail to the Finance and Facilities Committee for their review and feedback. On May 10th, 2022, we met with a quorum of the committee that included Mr. Murdoch, Mr. Esquaga, and Mr. Chapman. There was a lot of discussion, and overall, the budget was approved as presented. So the budget you're seeing today does not reflect any changes as a result of the committee meeting. Approval by the committee is advisory only, so the budget will not be adopted until approved by the board today. So the budget is largely guided by the board's funding policies per the strategic plan. So we'll start with a discussion of how those policies will be addressed in this budget. The first strategic funding policy is the policy related to general fund reserves. This policy has been in place for several years and calls for unassigned ending fund balance to be at a minimum of 10% of general fund expenditures. In this budget, that would call for unassigned fund balance of around $4 million. The budget supports and exceeds this amount, but it depends on activity throughout the year. Fund balance is reconciled at year end, and each year we report back to the board on that final audited fund balance figure. In the upcoming new strategic plan, we are proposing to increase this policy to a total of 15 to 17% to support organizational stability. The next strategic funding policy is the capital reserve account. The ending fund balance in our capital projects fund will be over $1 million and will meet this goal. Next is the debt sinking fund. The previous strategic plan called for contributions to the debt sinking fund if room tax revenues were in excess of $22 million. This is not budgeted given that it's no longer required as a result of the last bond refunding. This will also not be part of the policies in the new strategic plan. Next is our rainy day fund. The board previously set a policy to keep the rainy day fund at a level of $1 to $2 million. The current rainy day fund meets this policy, and our goal is a 10 to 20% increase in fiscal year 23 as we continue to build towards $2 million. Next is annual capital funding, which we reviewed in detail during we will review in detail during the next agenda item. We're using 9% of room tax collections towards capital funding, and the remainder of funding has been made available due to federal awards received as a result of the pandemic. Last are board initiatives. The two current board initiatives to be funded in this budget are air service and special events. Air service funding was established as part of the previous strategic plan, and we're establishing special event funding as part of this new strategic plan. This year, we're proposing $1 million in air service and $1 million in special event funding. We can go up to $1.5 million in air service per board policies, and historical amounts are shown on the screen. So next, we'll talk about general fund revenues and resources, which is how the budget is funded. This is the composition of general fund revenues and resources for the budget year compared to pre-pandemic. The largest portion of our revenues is room tax, which consists of collections and the tourism surcharge. The next highest component are Next highest component is carry forward fund balance, which is essentially amounts that we budgeted in this current fiscal year and won't be spending in this current fiscal year and want to carry forward to the next fiscal year. We also have revenues from facility operations and smaller other revenues that are generated by the departments. The biggest difference this year compared to pre-pandemic are, again, those grant awards that we've discussed during previous board meetings. In total, revenues and resources for fiscal year 23 are $54.7 million compared to $51.3 million pre-pandemic. So first, we'll review our budget for room tax revenues. These were estimated using trend analysis over average daily room rates, collections in prior periods, market segment trends, and other economic considerations. We prepared and reviewed different scenarios, and we ultimately decided to be moderately conservative. In the current year, room tax revenues are trending at 108% of pre-pandemic, and our budget in total is over 98%. Like I mentioned in the budget book, there's currently economic indicators at the national level that frequently predict a recession. The local economy, however, continues to perform really well with trends that are better than national averages, like our unemployment rate. If we find that revenues are coming in under budget, internally we'd readjust our budget and react quickly. If revenues come in over budget, we'll review that with the Finance Committee on a quarterly basis, and we'd likely request an augmentation to spend those revenues. Overall, we are in somewhat uncertain times, so an emphasis is being placed on closely monitoring performance and trends. Here we have historical RSCVA room tax revenues. Pre-pandemic, we were seeing steady increases. Fiscal year 19 set a record for room tax revenues. Revenues dipped during the pandemic, but still performed really well overall. This year, we're on track again for strong numbers. And again, fiscal year 23 is moderately conservative, just under those fiscal 19 figures. So next, we'll review room tax statistics. Our increases in room tax revenues have been heavily driven by average daily room rates. Year-to-date, ADR is about 20% higher than pre-pandemic. Total occupancy percentages, however, are lower than pre-pandemic. You'll see, again, we took a moderate approach and budgeted for a slight decrease in ADR. We're still adjusting and figuring out what the new normal is for those rates. Last month, consumer spending at the national level increased, but we don't know how sustainable that is against continued inflation. A tipping point could be reached that impacts those ADRs. Again, we watch these trends really closely and will adjust our predictions as needed. Here's a breakdown of total taxable room revenues by market segment. We've overall seen a slight shift in trends. Most notably, vacation rentals are seeing a lot of growth. Pre-pandemic, vacation rentals were about 5% of total taxable room revenues. Last year, they were 12% of the total, and this year, year-to-date, they're 9%. During the pandemic, hotel and other occupancy restrictions were a big driver related to that increase, but it's looking like vacation rentals will continue to trend really strongly. So here we have a comparison of facility revenues by facility and category. Again, this is in your budget book on page 8. For facility rental revenues, we used estimates prepared in conjunction with the sales department. One change to note this year related to food and beverage revenues is that we're now going to be presenting these net instead of gross. Under the ASM contract, given how the contract was administered, we reported gross revenues and gross expenses. Per relevant accounting standards, we will now present these amounts net. Same impact to our bottom line, but I want the board to be aware that our financial statements will look a bit different under this new agreement. These concessions and catering revenue estimates were provided by Aramark. We're still finalizing the contract terms with Aramark, and we expect to receive a revised budget after those terms are finalized. Aramark prepared this budget as part of the RFP, but we're, again, not expecting large swings in the net revenue number, but there might be changes in the gross revenues and expenses. The other revenue category consists of parking revenues, AV charges, internet charges, and other services, and we budgeted these based on current trends that we're seeing. Significant items to note regarding facilities revenues include that in 2019, we hosted 2 major citywide conventions, so convention center revenues were up due to those. And in 2023, the USBC Open Tournament returns to Reno for the first time since 2016. So here's a comparison of revenues in total by facility to prior years. Again, the major differences are really noted to those citywide conventions and USBC. We'll talk about facility expenses in detail later in the presentation, but I wanted to give the board an overview of our loss projections for the year compared to prior years, also found on page 9 of your budget book. So next we'll cover additional revenues and resources. Other revenues consist of certain administrative fees and smaller revenues generated by the individual departments and interest earnings. This year, other revenues include the amounts to be paid to the RSCVA by hotels related to the Open Tournament. In terms of additional funding, we've discussed our grant awards during previous board meetings, but as a reminder, the Nevada Commission on Tourism has earmarked $1.25 million of their recent EDA award to pass through to the RSCVA. The marketing department plans to create and submit the spending plan related to this grant award during the summer, with the hopes of receiving the money in the fall and spending it during that time period. And as we'll discuss a little further when we review the capital plan, but additional funding has been made due to federal rewards as a result of the pandemic, and such funding is proposed to be spent on capital improvements. Additionally, we anticipate that $4.8 million of available resources that will be carried forward from this current budget. That basically consists of unspent amounts in the current budget, like air service, special event funding, booking incentives, and the facility transition budget. This also consists of revenues that will be received during the last quarter of the year that are in excess of budget. These resources will become part of the ending fiscal 22 fund balance, will be carried forward to be spent in the fiscal 23 budget. So we've covered revenues in a lot of detail, so now we're going to move on to general fund expenses. Here we have an overview of general fund expenses by department. Marketing is the highest department, and that's partially due to the $1.2 million in grant funding that will be received and spent in marketing this year. And here we have a composition of expenses by department compared to pre-pandemic. You'll see that the distribution of our resources ended up being very similar to pre-pandemic, with marketing, facilities, and sales being the highest departments. Here we have a breakdown of those same general fund expenses by function. The change that jumps out the most is payroll. During our contract with ASM, we were required to report all of their expenses within the category of supplies and services, since those were contractual expenses to us. Since we're taking back the operation of the facilities, these expenses will now be charged within their respective categories. And on the next slides, you'll see more detailed comparisons and breakouts by category, where we'll talk more about the differences within each of these categories. So here we have the breakdown of payroll and related expenses. Facilities are 40% of our payroll and sales is 30%. Again, going forward, facilities staff are reflected as true payroll expenses, whereas previously these were contractual costs. Some of the objectives this year within payroll and related costs include creating new positions, like the Director of Sales for the National Bowling Stadium, which is a position that will be responsible for selling our area as a destination for bowling groups and tournaments. We also listened to the board's requests related to focusing more on the marketing of our facilities, and that objective will be supported by hiring a marketing manager for the facilities. We've also created a Senior Director of Sales and Events position within the sales department. This year, there will be COLA and merit increase opportunities made available for employees. And another thing I wanted to point out is that we're still in the process of remarketing our insurance benefits. You'll recall from a previous renewal that it was difficult to find interested insurers, since our insured population consisted of more retirees than active employees. Since that's changing with the transition, we're attempting to remarket our insurance. It's a very tight turnaround since we're providing information to the insurers as we're hiring employees, but we're hoping to hear back from the interested carriers in the next few weeks. Right now we're using preliminary estimates, so there could be some changes here. So next is supplies and services. 72% of this category is related to the facilities. Again, this total category is decreasing because all of ASM's expenses were charged to this line item previously, and now the true costs within this category will be charged here. We have a breakdown of the facilities expenses within this line item, the largest being utilities, next being event service expenses, which are essentially our temporary costs related to events such as temp labor and temp security. Next is professional services, repairs and maintenance, operating supplies, and the last is our food and beverage management fees that are budgeted to be paid to Aramark. Within this category, we're also anticipating increases in general liability insurance, but we're still waiting to receive those final quotes. We've also put in a good amount of work this year to mitigate some of those increases, such as implementing enhanced cybersecurity controls, since those controls are evaluated when we're being quoted by carriers. The full insurance renewal must be brought to the board for approval, and we'll bring that after quotes are received and evaluated. Within this line item as a whole, the smaller remaining items are contracted services, equipment leases, dues, and other services. Next is travel and entertainment. Travel and entertainment is budgeted at 108% of pre-pandemic levels. 84% of travel is related to the sales department. You'll see small increases in travel and entertainment for the other areas, which are to provide opportunities to staff for networking and professional development. Next is promotions and advertising. This category in total is at 117% of pre-pandemic levels. Specifically, advertising is at 99% of pre-pandemic levels, and again, that is supported by the grant award from Travel Nevada. This is also the line item where we budget air service, which again is budgeted at $1 million this year. We've also included $150,000 for facilities marketing initiatives, and other larger items within this category include website costs, production costs, and public relations costs. Special projects is historically where the organization budgets special event funding, event sponsorships, commitments, and related costs. Highlights within this line item include site fees for the 2023 USBC Open tournaments, a maximum of $250,000 for Miss USA per recent board action, $1 million in special event funding per board request, and the remaining $1 million is within the sales department and primarily supports event commitments, sponsorships, and other costs. The apportionment are the amounts that we grant to the Incline Village Crystal Bay Visitors Bureau based on collections in Washoe B. This increase is heavily driven by vacation rentals, as we discussed earlier. So next we'll talk a little bit about the RSCVA's other funds. The capital fund will be discussed in detail during our next agenda item, but we do have historical spending amounts in our current budget up on the screen. Again, this is going to be funded by room tax collections and additional funding made available due to grant awards. Next, we have the insurance fund. This was covered during our discussion of payroll-related benefits, but as you're aware, the RSCVA has a separate fund that accounts for health insurance and workers' compensation activities. Fund balance in this fund is generally minimal. In fiscal 19, we had a slight increase. This year, we'll have a slight decrease. These figures will change, again, because they're based on estimates. Lastly is the debt service fund. Transfers to this fund are budgeted at $8.1 million. After principal and interest payments, outstanding debt will be as follows at June 30th, 2023. With that, I'll open this item up for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Ms. Jager. Are there any comments in regards to the board? Mr. Chapman, I see you looking.
Yeah, I'll just thank you, Courtney, for that. And just as a reminder, and Courtney mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, we had extensive conversation at the committee level and did recommend approval to this board as presented.
All right. Any other second to that motion? Or was that a motion? I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry.
That was not a motion. That was just, but I can make it a motion if you're ready for that.
It sounded almost like a motion, but I wasn't sure. So anyways, Mrs. Urasquaga.
Now, I would like to add, as part of that discussion in the committee level, we spent some time bringing up this discussion of the Air Service Fund, and I just want to, again, kind of put it on the forefront. I really look forward to kind of seeing this over to Charles and his team. We've really wrestled with it. I want to say it's 3 legislative sessions ago There was a lot of heavy lifting to get this earmarked up to 1.5. I think we've really struggled, nobody's fault, of kind of defining just how we would use that. And I think I look forward to Charles and his team coming back and putting together a plan. I think the 1 million is a great amount. We have partners like RASC and that too, that depending on the opportunity, depending on the airlines may need to be brought into the mix on the deal too. But I look forward to kind of seeing how we could spend that to really promote air service development or retention into the area.
Mr. Harris?
Just to add into that, there was a healthy discussion we had at that subcommittee, and it was really philosophically and looking for some direction from the board that do we hold that $1 million for minimum revenue guarantees to help bring new additional flights to the region, or do we then spend that down in marketing plans to help support lift in general? Now, we've also had discussions with the airport, and I actually asked them, if we were to go spend that, what would you like to see? So we've actually received some feedback in anticipation of direction from the board on that.
Just to follow up on that, you're asking for input from the board, and this is just one member, so take it for what it's worth. But I kind of look at it as we're open, right? We're open for, it doesn't have to be risk mitigation. Honestly, it might be Mr. Jimenez in his tour and travel side that reach out to Southwest and their vacation packages. I look at it, let's lay it all out, and then we can kind of decide this makes sense. If we're waiting for just risk mitigation, we could be waiting for a while. So yeah, and we have been. So I think I'd be more willing to say lay out some options, and then we'll kind of carve it up from there.
Mr. Murdoch.
On that point, what you've got is, I just read an article, and it was actually Charles sent it out. Southwest Airlines right now is trying to recover in hubs, and they're going to a hub strategy. To me, it speaks to that we're open for business. Hey, Southwest, to your point, Stephen, we need to get with the air carriers and say, we've got this fund. How can we drive more people onto your planes and help you? Because the airlines are doing well, and I know airfares are off the charts, but at some point, if you read that article, Southwest is looking for more of a hub style. So I imagine they're the 10,000-pound gorilla with all the airport statistics. It's very important that we just don't sit on that cash for mitigation, that we spend it on the off years with driving through our websites, their websites. But I totally am in agreement with Stephen on that one. We've got to use it, and I hate to lose it, but we don't lose it, but it just goes to next year. But hopefully we could be driving some flights, whether it's JSX or whatever, but we have opportunity here. And I think I'm on RASC as Stephen is on RASC. We really need to be vocal about, hey guys, come back with some plans for us to get after these airlines, because everybody in the country right now will be hurting from these airlines and the fuel costs. It's a time to probably help them fill their planes so they're happy.
Any other discussion by any of the members? Councilwoman Bybee.
Courtney, just want to thank you for all your work and a great budget, very detailed, very concise. Really, for those of us who aren't, CPAs or financial experts, very easy to follow and a really good breakdown. I also appreciate that it was conservative, because I know we just finished our Sparks budget. I think the county and Reno both did too, and we all have to be conservative, because the gorilla in the room right now is inflation, and none of us really know how much. I mean, we know will impact us. We don't know how much. So I appreciate the conservative approach to this, because I think we all need to be right now. And once again, thank you for your work.
Ms. Jager, one other thing I want to add to this commentary is that you pointed out through our proposed budget, the room tax statistics in regards to vacation short-term rentals tremendously increasing year over year since the pre-pandemic. And as we continue to discuss that and see what we've looked at, $37 million next to the 258 generated by coming in second place next to hotels. So that's a significant amount. And as I pointed out earlier, 98% of those reside in Incline Village. And when you talk about the initiatives, I want to make sure that staff understands that, and I agree with the statements that have been made here by board members, but if we're sitting on $1.5 million at an airport, at an airline recovery through for RASC, we need to be a little bit more dynamic so that if projects come up, capital improvement projects, which we're going to go over in just a minute, but deferred maintenance, anything that specific that could include Incline Village, Crystal Bay's Visitors Bureau to bolster some of those projects there to do, increase or help with those projects there. I'd like to see that kind of flexibility within the budget, from a facilities operations standpoint, to make sure that there are abilities for us to be dynamic. Being that you're seeing a significant amount of room tax come from those, but there are implications from that need to be addressed, and that's through outreach and different things of that nature. So we want to make sure that we're working with our partners up there to identify that. So that's all I would ask, that we be a little fluid within the budget for the next cycle, and make sure we can address that. Mr. Murdoch.
I've got a couple things. Just one is, Courtney, I appreciate this. Very well done. The facilities, now that we are now taking them in-house, and it looks like we're paying a little more than we did when we had the facility operator and the middleman, as they say. So that's just our startup cost that year, and then it should get a lot better from here. Am I correct in assuming?
Absolutely. In this first year, some of the larger expenses are going to be catching up on deferred maintenance. We have a quite amount budgeted for repairs and maintenance due to deferred maintenance that ASM didn't tackle during the contract period. And also, we're hoping to phase out certain professional services costs. ASM had a high turnover rate for employees, so as we're able to train employees and retain people, we'll be able to outsource less as professional services and do work in-house at lower cost rates. So we do expect that as the years go on, we're going to see expense savings.
And then one last comment, because you guys have to do the city buildings too, when you guys get a grant, the committee recommended helping out the bowling stadium, but it would be nice, because I think the city would want some funding for closed venue, I think, down at their facilities as well. Not that I'm saying if there is grants, and we can put grants down, the city would need some grants too as well. I would hope that we would look at it on whether it was Sparks or Reno. But when you asked for that $2.85 million for closed venue, we had closed venues downtown too. So I think whether we work with the city of Reno or the city of Sparks on closed venues or whatever, we need to make sure that we're spreading the wealth and give an opportunity to gain funding for those buildings during this tough time. So that's my other point. And then I wanted to ask one last question. On sales and marketing, are we totally back to our normal numbers? I mean, it looks like it here, but are we body count wise up to full staff on all of our sales and marketing teams? And
So in terms of budget, the sales department's budget in total is 122% of pre-pandemic, and the marketing department's budget is well above pre-pandemic as well. And Mr. Harris can speak a little bit more to those objectives.
Yeah, so when it comes to the marketing dollars, Courtney said it earlier, we're 99% to plan for the new proposed budget, but please note within that budget that $1.25 million is still coming from Nevada on that grant that we have. So we're still short, but we allocated that, and there's a whole bunch of hoops that we have to jump through, 90 days, we're gonna use that in the fall, but both sales is past where they were, marketing is really close, and one of the things that we have to note in that is that expenses are higher, right? So whether retain employees or programs and things like that, so that we're adjusting along those lines.
All right. Ms. Keel.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney. Great presentation. I appreciate the comparison to pre-pandemic. It makes it very easy to follow and informative. Just have a question on formatting. I'm sure this is probably common with governmental budgets, and I'm just not used to it in the businesses that I've run. Is there a way that we can get a format that says, like on a one sheet, revenues, expenses, bottom line? Because currently you have to flip through all these different pages to see the different sections, and I really would just like a 1 or 2 pager to see how it all flows from top to bottom.
Absolutely, we can create that and send that to the board.
Thank you. And then if you can include it with the prior years, just like have the headers be the same and have the line item expenses be the same. It's just condense them so that they're all like marketing, here you go, special projects, here you go, and then the same headers across the top of the different years.
Absolutely, we can use the same format that I provided to you previously and just insert this budget into that format.
Thank you so much.
All right, Mrs.
Mr.
Fraza.
Chair. 3 questions. First, on the health insurance, and I know other smaller boards have done this. I think Reno Housing Authority might be one where they're under the cities because of the plant. You have a small employee group. His staff looked at potentially partnering with one of the other local governments to bring those costs down because it is, in the insurance world, harder to insure a smaller group.
Yes, we have vetted that option with our broker previously, and the last time we looked into it, it was going to cost us more than what we were currently paying, but that is an option they're considering this year as well.
Are we self-funded on the insurance or
We are
no?
no longer self-funded.
Okay, and then on the, you had the screen there showing the marketing and the grant, and Board Member Esquaga had mentioned this. On that grant, can we take on the marketing from tourism? Seems to me that's a really good opportunity for those grants to fund the Miss USA. We had talked about that being more marketing, and what a better time for that fall to take the $250,000 out of that grant. I think the board all agreed it's a huge marketing opportunity. So I don't know, and Charles, you were saying we had to do that in the fall time?
We've currently budgeted for the Miss USA funding separately from this grant, given that the marketing departments wanted to earmark this grant for other initiatives, but it definitely did assist with making more funding available towards Miss USA.
Okay, and that special funds project, is that out of the general allocation, or is, because to me that is important between the event side and the marketing side when we're funding things on the ledger.
Yes, special projects is part of the general fund. It's just a separate category within the general fund. And again, that's where we usually have different things like site fees. That's where the funding for Miss USA is being budgeted from. That's where special event funding is budgeted from, and other commitments.
Okay, and then on the follow-up, just being the board member from the airport, on what Mr. Esquaga said in that air service fund, obviously, I agree with you that incentive to bring the flights here. However, there's a huge pilot shortage, which is a big problem, I think, as everyone's aware. So even that funding, and they are moving towards those hub airports. So I just, Charles, and I'm sure you're coordinating with the airport authority, but I do believe that marketing, I mean, looking at it strategically from a year off, is it may be more, on the marketing side, as I think Mr. Esquaga suggested, than actually in the incentive side on the employment side, because that pilot shortage is really bad, and where strategically the airlines are looking at.
Jessica, absolutely. And again, working very closely with Darren and his team, and from that spend, the subcommittee really asked us to start digging into that. So moving forward, when we have everybody back, there'll be some options that we can present back to the board to say, look, if we want to spend down that $1 million, whether it's 50%, 70% along marketing programs to drive in partnership with the airlines, it's something that we will now consider, which we haven't. And to that point, Stephen said, we haven't, I don't think, done any minimum revenue guarantees since 2018. So there's an opportunity that if we want to go down that road, that we will now look at that.
And then Chairman Lucy, just a question for you. When you were talking about that, if there's funding left over from that, were you suggesting potentially rolling that into facilities? Because I'm I'm in favor of that too, giving staff that flexibility. And I don't know if that has to come back as an augmentation or not.
That does have to come back from a budget policy augmentation, so that would be something, but we want to make sure that there's flexibility if funds are available that aren't going to be expended or allocated in the budget for that fiscal year, and we're getting close to the end of that expenditure. There might be opportunities to expend that money in the last quarter of the fiscal year to move forward and maybe expedite or bring forward some of the prioritized capital improvements in that fiscal year and take them out of the next fiscal year's budget. So that's one of the, well, it was just a recommendation, but something we would have to augment as a board. Mr. Murdoch.
And I just got one last question, and it's on the site fees. Do we collectively do site fees all in one area, just like Shannon asked for condensed? Is there a way, whether it's a site fee for any event or any convention or an NCAA basketball tournament or even a bowling site fee, do they all come out of, how does that work? Are the site fees charged directly to, so we know?
Yeah, so per board member request, the USBC site fees specifically are charged as an operating cost of the organization rather than an operating cost of the facilities. So we've adjusted the facilities expenses to ensure that they're comparable year to year and don't include those USBC site fees. Within the facilities budget, ASM was charged with categorizing expenses, and they have their site fees within the facilities expenses, if that makes sense.
So we are charging?
They are. So the rest, aside from USBC, those are going towards the facilities.
Is that the way, is that normal accounting? I'm just asking.
Yeah, that's how the RSCVA has recorded those for the last, previously when we ran the facilities. So we're just keeping that consistent with how ASM operated and how RSCVA categorized those, with the exception of USBC, which were moved per board member request.
The only reason I'd ask is if it takes away from the departments not getting, if that's allocated against their budget is, and you allocate enough for their budget to be able to cover the cost of this.
Absolutely. We factor that in. When building department budgets, we factor in any special items. Like when the board asked for additional special event funding, we still ensured that that didn't affect the advertising budget for marketing, and we kept that at 99%. Same with any other department's budget. One of the first priorities is that we review board requests and special initiatives and make sure that those are covered and while still making the other departments whole.
All right. Seeing no further conversation from any of the members, this is a public hearing on this budget. Is there any public comment, Madam Clerk, signed in or willing to speak at this time?
None at this time, thank you.
All right, being that this is a public hearing, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the board, not close the public hearing, but bring it back to public comment back to the board. Acknowledge there is no public comment on this item. I will call for, looking for a motion to approve the budget as proposed.
Motion to approve the fiscal year 22-23 budget as proposed.
I have a motion from Mr. Chapman. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Second from Councilwoman Bybee. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Please, everybody who is here in person, meet with Mr. Kennedy after to ratify the budget. Everybody needs to sign the budget and the budget amendment. I unfortunately have to depart. I am going to turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Seller for her to run the remainder of the meeting for the capital improvements plan with Ms. Jaeger. And thank you very much, everybody. Have a great day.
All right.
1 minute to set up.
Yes. We will continue when you're set up, Courtney. Just let us know.
All right, we're good to go. So I'll just go ahead. All right, I can go ahead. Great.
You're all right? Go ahead,
Yep.
Courtney. Thank you.
So, good morning, Courtney Jaeger, Vice President of Finance. Here with me today is Trent LaFerriere, Vice President of Facilities. And today we're presenting to you the President and CEO's proposed capital improvement plan for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023. As a reminder, this capital improvement plan was presented to the Finance Committee previously, but their approval is advisory only, so it will not be adopted until approved by the board today. Up on the screen, we have an agenda of how this presentation will work. We'll first, again, talk about that committee recap. We'll talk about our capital improvement plan overview as a whole, talk about carry forward capital projects from this current fiscal year and the proposed capital projects for the fiscal year 23 budget. So as part of our budget process, we presented the capital improvement plan in detail to the Finance and Facilities Committee for their review and feedback. On May 10th, 2022, a quorum of the committee met that included Mr. Murdoch, Mr. Esquaga, and Mr. Chapman. Overall, the capital plan was approved with certain proposed changes, which were incorporated into this version of the capital plan being presented today and in your printed board packet. Also, just again, I wanted to remind the board that that committee approval was advisory only. The capital plan identifies capital improvement projects for the upcoming year. The RSCVA funds capital improvements for the Reno Sparks Convention Center and the Reno Sparks Livestock Event Center. Capital improvements for the Reno Event Center and the National Bowling Stadium are funded by the City of Reno. Annually, we assess the needs of the facilities, considering different priorities like safety and functionality, and we propose projects to address within the next year. On the screen, you'll also see historical capital expenditures. During the pandemic, we cut back on capital spending. This year, we're proposing an increase in capital spending that we'll review later in detail in this presentation. Next, we're going to discuss carry forward capital projects to give the board an update on current year capital projects. It's typical for capital projects to take longer than 1 year to complete. Each year, we usually have projects that overlap between fiscal years, and this year we saw additional delays due to labor shortages and supply shortages as a result of the pandemic. Even with these delays, we still plan to complete these projects, and most of them are already in progress. We also aren't requesting new funding for these projects. They'll be completed using the current year's budget, but we did want to give the board a status update. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Trent now.
Good, almost afternoon. On our carry forward projects, these are board approved for the 21-22 capital. And what we're looking at is we've got a few major ones, roofing at the convention center, and we're looking at halls 4 and 5 to make sure that we are watertight, and right now we're not. So you've got that going forward. We are currently designing the spec with Benchmark, which is our consultant on that. We're expecting to be having that completed on or about October of 22. Our security cameras are essentially in the same setup where we are currently building the spec with a Vigilon, and we will be looking at around October, depending on product availability. Just like everything else, the market is kind of tough on that, but we're moving forward with it quite well. The LED message center board over at RSLEC, we're building the specs for that currently, and we expect that to be completed on or about September of 22. I can go through the rest of these in detail if you'd like, or open this up for questions.
I have a question, Trent, just out of curiosity. Ann Silver for the record. What is a mechanical component of a flagpole?
It's when you're raising and lowering the flags, we've got two styles over at the convention center. One is rope and one is cable. So if you're putting in a crank on the cable, you've got a mechanism at the base, goes up to pulleys at the top, and that's what raises and lowers your flag. As those wear, which they have in the past, we want to replace them so when we do lower the flags like we did last week, that they actually function.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding anything on this item? Trent has not gone through them item by item, but are there any questions regarding any of the elements of the capital improvement carry forward projects? Hearing none? Go on.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on. So annually, our capital plan is funded using room tax revenues. This year, we're proposing to spend $3 million of room tax revenues on capital projects. As discussed in prior meetings, additional funding has been made available due to federal grant awards received as a result of the pandemic. We're proposing to spend the $2.8 million in additional funds on capital, and Trent is next going to review our proposed fiscal year 23 capital projects.
Once again, good afternoon. So what we are proposing on this, again, over at the convention center, is another area of the building for roofing repairs. We kind of do this in a round-robin cycle. As one gets repaired, we move on to the next roof and so on, and then once we get back to the beginning, we continue. We are also looking at upgrading, a continued upgrade on our lighting system, which we started about 4 years ago, and this is to complete that project at about $300,000. In addition to that, we're looking at the HVAC Delta controls, which again is a continuation of a project we had already started. We had a limited fund. We went up to that maximum, and it wasn't enough to complete the project, and we'd like to continue it so we can operate the building efficiently. That will save us power. It gives us better efficiency, comfort for the clients, so on and so on. And then this list goes on down. The lighting upgrades. This is to put in more LED lighting throughout the property at the convention center, back of house, stairwells, areas that burn almost 24/7, so it'll save us a lot in power. And usually you're going to see, depending on which contractor you talk to, but on average about an 80 to 85% savings in energy use over that lighting and the fluorescent. And I can go on, but if you have any questions, we can open it up again.
Are there any questions from board members regarding the proposed capital improvements listed on this page 4? Any questions, comments? I have one question, Trent.
Yes.
Because I work in this building and see what's happening outside. I love Dutch Brothers coffee, but to what extent is there any capital improvement money involved in securing the safety, for lack of a better word, in that crossing area between Dutch Brothers and the convention center? It's a tremendous road hazard. I know the City of Reno's code enforcement group has been involved in putting cones out on the road, but you generally get hundreds of people crossing the street trying
Correct.
to get to Dutch Brothers.
What was just completed, forgive me if the date's incorrect, but about a year and a half ago, the City of Reno came in with working with us and put in that crosswalk that's midway down the block. Now, I know it's a little off from Dutch Brothers,
Yeah.
but it still is utilized. We've got the flashing lights there. We've got the access ADA-wise into our ramp that goes down into the property. So that was accomplished. I don't know of anything further that is being looked at by our entrance that would be right across the street.
I appreciate that, thank you. I'm just waiting for someone to, have a terrible accident because people run across from all points of the convention center across to get to that site. So they don't necessarily go to the flashing lights.
Correct.
And walk accordingly, but thank you. Appreciate your answer. Are there any other questions, comments on proposed capital?
Chair. Sorry. Ann.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Madam
Chair.
Chair.
Yes,
Really-
go ahead, please.
Oh, that's okay. No, I think you bring up a really good point, and I will get with staff to look at that. And I think it's a prime example, again, of why we do the master plan, to look at those areas in which cause that kind of backlog. And I mean, you're exactly right. Every time I go by there, it is a problem. So again, this is probably a good reason why to do a master plan. And I will get Carrie Kosky and staff on that, because I think, to your point, you are 100% right on.
Thank you, Mayor Sheevy. It's just an ongoing concern. I don't think any one of us wants a death or accident to occur in front of the convention center. And given our interest in making sure we have that convention center busy 365 days a year, that's a lot of people crossing the street for a cup of coffee. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Courtney, go ahead.
We can go ahead and move on to the second part.
This next part is to do with the grant money that we're. Oh, I'm sorry. Over at the Livestock Event Center, we have some more projects in plan, and the livestock panels, those are the panels, the fencing that takes the cows, sheep, whatever, and protects them. Some of that Equipment over there has degraded over the years, and it can be dangerous to the animals, and so we want to upgrade that. We've got a sump pump in place for our main arena, which will help us with if we have leaks, if we have overflow, it'll clean that out so we don't have to have personnel going down into the pit to clean that. The concrete landings, as you go into the main arena, you've got 5 different entrances around there, and they're degraded, and we want to get in there and clean that up so you don't have any trip hazards or anything related to that. We could, administrative, over here we've got the marketing lounge, which we are currently putting new offices, kind of a configuration so that we can accommodate the new people coming on. We've already got the desks in there, the computers, the phones, and we want to do a little bit with dividing that area up a little bit more. Boardroom equipment in here. We've put in some money to augment some of the issues that we have with what we have. We've all experienced it. We want to clean that up so the Zoom can hear these better and communicate, and same thing in this room. Any questions?
Ms. Ferraza, I understand you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think it goes back to, I think Courtney, and I'm sorry, I was trying to ask during the presentation. And it goes back to this, the capital improvement plan and the facilities losses. And you look at the proposed budget and the facilities losses and expenses. And you had said something during the presentation on for capital improvements regarding the funding in which it pays for those capital improvements. Is there in the statute, and I looked for it before this meeting because the capital improvements are coming out of the general fund. Is there a reason why the general fund is only funding certain facilities and not the others?
So my understanding that is we only fund the Reno Convention Center and the Reno Sparks Livestock Event Center due to our operating agreement with the City of Reno. That agreement with the City of Reno does not require the RSCVA to fund the capital improvements for the downtown properties.
Okay, so the operating agreement, and I looked at that as well. I guess what I'm asking is that because all the room tax comes into a pot, and I'm looking at the revenues coming in and the expenses for the other facilities that was presented to us earlier. So why wouldn't we, all this, because those facilities are generating room tax too, that everyone pays into, why wouldn't we be doing CapEx on those facilities as well? Because where would that funding source be coming from those other 2 facilities? That doesn't make sense from a state. There's nothing in the state statute that prohibits us from funding all those facilities, correct?
Correct. There's nothing that prohibits us. It's been the RSCVA's standard practice not to fund those based on the operating agreement. But if that's a change the board wanted to suggest, that's definitely something that would be allowable for us to pay for.
Okay, and then again, going back to the facility losses, and I don't know what page it is, but and everyone asked this question when it's kind of ironic because everyone asked this question when it came to the bowling stadium and the event center, but I'm also zeroing in on the convention center. So, and the losses there in relation to the revenues on all our facilities, and why we wouldn't be putting CapEx in all of our facilities that are generating room tax dollars, to me needs to be looked at from a policy standpoint, because it's a fairness and equity of how we fund CapEx on certain facilities because they're all tourism-related facilities. So we can have bowlers come here all day long or special events, concerts on any of these facilities. If they're not maintained, then we can't bring in those types of events. And as we heard earlier, bowling is the largest generator of room tax revenue that current event has for our county. I think 420 million, you said, Courtney, was the number. So I'm just looking at that in relation to the CapEx that staff is proposing here.
Jessica, this is Ann, and thank you very much for your comments. Let me turn your question over to Ben. Ben Kennedy, if you'd like to address that.
Sure, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. So as Ms. Jaeger referenced, so the operation of the Downtown Event Center and the bowling stadium are by way of a management agreement with the City of Reno. While the board is free to allocate funds to any of the venues for CapEx, you're correct, there's no limitation in the statute. The operating agreement with the City of Reno obligates the city to pay for those capital expenditures. So for, the Convention Center and the Livestock Event Center, I believe the RSCVA is the sole source of funding for that CapEx. The operating agreement obligates the City of Reno, which is why I think historically the RSCVA hasn't funded those venues. But if that's something that the board wants to change, that's absolutely in the board's discretion, and you could allocate funding to those facilities, capital projects, if that was the board's desire.
Okay, then let me follow up on that. So that the money that comes in, the lineage fees for bowling, all the money that comes in for those facilities, the ones the city owns, where is that funding going to, Courtney? Does it come to the RSCVA?
It does. It goes towards funding the expenses, the operating expenses for those facilities.
Okay, and then I would ask the same question for the Convention Center and the Livestock Event Center.
The revenues generated by those facilities go towards the operating expenses for those facilities, and any deficit, which is the losses that those facilities have each year, are paid for by room tax dollars.
Okay, and that would be the same with the other two facilities as well?
Correct.
Mr. Murder.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Murder.
Again, just for clarity, I brought it up. The challenge is that if the City of Reno had an opportunity for grant funding, or the RSCVA did, we should have included their buildings, is what we're basically saying here. That's what I brought up. If we didn't know the federal was going to give 2.85, and that was for all buildings, all shuttered venues. So that's the point we're trying to make here, is that didn't even happen there. Well, you did give us the projector money, but that's where we're going with this. And I don't know.
Mr. Squaga.
Courtney.
Just to clarify, though, are we talking about?
So we haven't moved on.
We already covered grant funding.
So that's
stream,
actually
right?
the last slide. We haven't covered that yet, which projects that are going to be covered by the funds made available from the grant. If we do want to move on to that and then gear the discussion towards that, this might be a good.
Madam Mayor, did you have a point you wanted to make?
I'm glad you brought that up, Courtney, because that was going to be my next question. But I also want to remind everyone the $2 surcharge is dwindling because some of those gaming properties have gone away. So I think it is something that should come back to the board and be reevaluated with, especially if we're not allocating any of that through that grant funding as well. So thanks. I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar, that the money in the $2 surcharge is dwindling because we are seeing gaming properties go away downtown.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mayor Sheevy. Appreciate that comment. Courtney, is there anything you want to further address on this?
I think we've covered it really well. We'll go ahead and move on to proposed capital projects that will be funded from the grant, for the funds made available from the grant, and Trent will go into detail about those.
So to start off, this is at the Convention Center, and again, we're looking at roofing systems because we have a very extensive roofing system over there. So we are looking at $1.3 million to continue repairs to the roofs, and this would be the registration lobby and A meeting rooms. The air walls, those are to repair and replace mechanical components on those. The air walls are what divide our halls into different configurations. They are on rolling tracks. They are moved by hand. They are 32 to 34 foot high. So we want to make sure that they are safe for our clients and our employees. The exhibit hall painting, this is in all 5 exhibit halls. The paint is old, 20-plus years old. It's kind of a cream color that does not bode well with the new LED lighting we've done in there, so we want to brighten that up, and it gives the clients a better experience. Lighting upgrades, same idea. We're looking at continuing our LED changeover on every bit of the property. We've got some money in there for vehicles. Again, we have vehicles that are 20 to 22 years old. And they show it. It's something that we need for the safety of our employees when they're going to run parts. Electrical upgrades. This is over at RSLEC. We're looking at a new transformer so that we can power the events that are in the main arena. The electrical system over there is old and wasn't set up to run the events that we would like to run in there without bringing in generators and that sort of thing. The power drops over there at RSLEC, are the same thing. That helps with our clients being able to set up in there without running extension cords all over the place and trying to tape them to the floors. At NBS, we're looking at the large screen projector, and that is the big screen that is over the lanes, and we've earmarked $250,000 to that. And then we've got a capital reserve of $150,000.
Mr. Squaga, go ahead.
Stephen Esquaga, for the record. Just to clarify, I know we shifted that over to the large screen projector, which makes a lot of sense. There was an item way back that was, I thought it was on CapEx, like a 1 point some million on projectors for the NBA. Am I off?
No, if I'm correct in what you're asking about is the projectors that run the scoring system. And that is going to be taken up with the $2 surcharge along with the USBC contract.
And Madam Chair, that's exactly my issue with this, because the grant included all 4 facilities. That $2 surcharge is not sustainable. Like this policy, this is a 10-year operating agreement, and we have to have facilities that are in good working order for these projects. And I'm looking at what's being proposed, and with all due respect to the Finance Committee, it's an issue of equity and where these funding sources go to. And I can understand the $2 surcharge helping supplant, or opportunity, but these are really, it goes back to what you said, Ms. Silver, the goal of the RSCVA and the role of tourism, and that should be the role of the RSCVA in funding the CapEx of those facilities. We have different standards for different facilities, and I'm just concerned and have issues that we don't have some CapEx in there, especially when the bowlers are coming in, but even the REC for some of those facilities. I'm looking at livestock and the convention facility, but not really anything on those other facilities.
Thank you. Good points. Any other comments?
Problematic.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Bybee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess the information that would help me is how much is being generated from that $2 surcharge. I mean, I kind of feel like I'm in the dark knowing that's there. I acknowledge what the mayor has stated is true. We've lost Harrah's, we're losing some gaming properties. So to kind of give me a better idea of how much is in that $2 surcharge that is supposed to be used for the capital, the CIPs for those 2 properties, where that stands, because I think that might be an incentive for us to relook at. And my understanding, Mr. Kennedy, is we would have to obviously look at the operating agreements that were contractually with the city of Reno right now, and we'd have to relook at that. But an idea of what that $2 surcharge looks like and what the needs are would help at least would help me kind of determine, is that something we do need to revisit?
Well, thank you, Councilman Bybee. I think based on the comments I'm hearing, we seem to have two choices here. We can approve the capital plan as described to all of us for the period July 1st through 2022 through June 30th, 2023, or we can in fact postpone the vote on what has been proposed to us and reconvene at a later date to discuss to further discuss the comments made today. The only issue is we need to approve a budget, or I assume the RSCVA would like to get started on spending some of this money on capital improvements. So Ben, do you have any comment, Mr. Kennedy, on how we best proceed?
Sure. So we've approved the allocation in the budget. So now the question is, how do we want to spend the capital improvement funds? And I think that's right. We can approve it as presented. We can give direction to staff to go back and take a look at these other facilities and come back with a proposal that may include some of the needs of those facilities. As far as sort of projects that are in the pipeline or time sensitive, I don't know if those projects exist. If they do, we could approve a limited number of projects that they could get started on right now to the extent they need to, and then come back and revisit sort of the allocation of the remaining pool. So I think you've got several options here in front of you.
Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My suggestion might be, because it sounds like the conversation is around the grant funding. We have three separate buckets of dollars here. We have prior year carry forward at $2.5 million. We have the $3 million of the proposed capital projects, and then the 2.8 of the grant funding. Would it make sense, or might it make sense, to approve the carryover funds as well as the proposed capital projects of the $3 million in this fiscal year budget as presented, and then delay the conversation around the grant funding, because it seems like that's where the conversation lies, and I would put that forward in a motion.
I was just about to ask you if you'd make that a motion. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Murdoch. Yes.
If, I mean, you're looking at the grant funding, I would ask Charles and team, if Trent has something on his list that's not up here, is there a list that none of the board has seen that had to do with, ASM ran our facilities downtown. And I heard it from you guys that they didn't do their CapEx responsibilities. ASM did not. That's not, whose fault is that? That's not ours or yours, it's just they didn't do it. So my point is, Trent, if you had a hit list of things that are on fire down there, it'd be nice to know, because I think, to answer one other question, is I think the fund downtown's about $1.2 million a year, is what I'm thinking. Yeah, 1.2. I could be ballpark it, but anyway, that's all I'm saying is if Trent has something, it'd be nice to bring it forward somehow if there's something on fire, and know that we should get our share of that money.
One of the things I would suggest down at the bowling stadium is to remove those band lights off of the exterior of the building. We don't burn them. They don't operate correctly, but more importantly, they're dangerous. You have almost 2 miles of 8-foot sheets of Lexan that are on 5 layers up there. And when we get high winds, they blow off. When we have snow and ice built up on the ball, when it slides off, it takes them down to the sidewalk right in front of the entrance. And I don't like the danger potential there, the liability, and they need to come off. That would be my suggestion right off the bat.
And Mr. Murdoch, let me answer your question a little bit of a different way. So the facilities folks, Trent and Jose, have put together a priority list, and we're talking about $6 to $7 million on the buildings that we operate, right? Not necessarily stuff from the city. And so when we look at the funds that we're going to propose to the board to spend, it is based upon available dollars in the budget plus the potential grant money. So there are things that are not on the list. There's probably, if the board wants us to go back to Trent's point and look at the lighting or other areas if we want to realign the priorities for all 4 buildings versus just the 2. But to answer your question, we're talking 6 to 7 in deferred costs that haven't been tackled that are on that agenda to be spent.
I do believe we have an action item to take up. We have a motion on the floor, and Mr. Chapman, if you'd repeat that motion. Are any other comments before I ask Mr. Chapman to do that?
Yeah, I have
Because
one.
We need to go, we have this open action.
I'll restate that motion, see if there's a second, and I'm sure there's going to be some more discussion. But my motion is to approve the proposed capital improvement plan for the carryover capital projects at 2.5 million and the proposed capital projects for fiscal year 22-23 at 3 million, as presented.
I'll second. Stephen, for the record.
We have a second for Mr. Esquaga. Are those in favor, please say aye.
Is there
Is there
discussion?
any additional, I'm sorry, is there any additional conversation about this?
Yeah, so I just need clarification. So the grant is coming back to us on the CapEx.
Yes, that's what the motion contains.
Okay, so that, and I'm sorry, that available is 2.8?
Yes. To answer your question, yes.
Okay.
So.
Thank
we have a
you.
Motion, we have a second. May I ask for an aye vote if you are in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Hearing no objections, motion carries. Any noes? Sorry. It's unanimous. Thank you for all the prompts. All right. We have now, let's go back because we coupled some items together. We are on item J, board member comments regarding items for future meetings. Do any board members have comments they would like to make regarding upcoming meetings and items they would like to see on future agendas?
I have one, Madam Chair, and I've talked to Mr. Harris about this, and I would like to contemplate this sometime after the start of the fiscal year, is to have a conversation with the board about that tourism impact conversation at the Washoe Tahoe portion of the RSCVA jurisdiction.
All right, duly noted. That's an item for the next board consideration. Any other comments from the board? Hearing none, I will move to item number K, or letter K, comments from the floor by the public. Are there any public comments, which are limited to 3 minutes?
No additional public comments at this time.
Hearing no additional public comments, I will move to adjournment. I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. Harris.
First of all, a lot of heavy lifting today, a lot of things on the agenda, probably the longest agenda that we've had. I just want to, first of all, thank the board for great discussions today and to move forward. Thank you. And to Lisa, to Mike, to Courtney, to Trent, Jose, everybody, Ben, this entire team that put this stuff together. There's a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of things we're trying to get done. So thank you to the team. Great job, and turn it back over to the Vice Chair.
Thanks, Mr. Harris. I'm sure we all want to thank you and the entire RSCVA team for all this information. Great meeting, great dialogue. So we are hereby adjourned. Thank you.